What if the purest heart in anime broke? Look, we all know Goku. The guy who sees good in literally everyone, who'd rather make friends than enemies, who's saved the universe more times than we can count. But what happens when that same pure heart gets twisted by grief? When someone who can crack planets with a punch decides that free will is too dangerous to exist? This isn't your typical evil Goku story. This is about love becoming poison, about protection becoming imprisonment, about a man so terrified of losing anyone else that he's willing to steal their humanity to keep them safe. Picture this. Goku arrives home to find his family murdered. The corruption that follows doesn't just change him, it fractures reality itself, creating a multiversal war where every version of our hero becomes the villain. And the only one who can stop him, his own son, forced to fight the man who taught him everything about being a hero. Hit that like button if you're ready for this emotional roller coaster, and let's dive in. The morning sun cast long shadows across Beerus planet as Goku wiped sweat from his brow. 3 hours of training with Whis, and he still couldn't land a single hit on the angel. Not that he expected to, that wasn't the point anymore. Your form is improving, Goku, Whis said, lowering his staff, though I sense your mind is elsewhere today. Goku straightened up, rolling his shoulders, just thinking about dinner. Chi-Chi's making her special stir-fry tonight, and Goten's been bugging me to teach him that new technique I've been working on. Ah yes, family, Whis smiled that knowing smile of his. Perhaps we should, the words died in the air. Goku's head snapped toward Earth, his key sense suddenly screaming danger. Something was wrong, very wrong. Goku? Whis' voice seemed to come from miles away. Terror, pure, undiluted terror was flooding through his connection to his family. Chi-Chi's key signature flickered like a candle in the wind, and Goten's was fading fast. I have to go. The words came out as barely a whisper. Goku pressed 2 fingers to his forehead, locking onto their key signatures. Instant transmission carried him across the void between worlds in a heartbeat, but even that felt too slow. He materialized in his living room to silence. The house looked normal at first glance. Chi-Chi's cooking magazine still sat on the coffee table. Goten's schoolbooks were scattered across the floor where he'd left them that morning. The TV was on, some cartoon playing to an empty room, but the smell hit him then. Copper and iron blood, Chi-Chi, his voice cracked. Goten, no answer. Goku's feet carried him toward the kitchen before his mind could process what he was seeing. 2 bodies lay crumpled on the floor, surrounded by a pool of crimson that had already started to darken. Chi-Chi's apron was torn, her face turned toward the door as if she'd been trying to reach someone in her final moments. Goten lay a few feet away, his small hand stretched toward his mother. The world stopped. Goku dropped to his knees between them, his hands hovering over their still forms. He could feel the absence where their warmth used to be, where their ki used to shine like little stars in his awareness. No, no, no. He gathered Chi-Chi into his arms, pressing his face against her hair. She still smelled like the jasmine shampoo she used, still felt like home, but she was cold, so cold. He tried to channel his ki into her the same way he'd done 1,000 times before to heal battle wounds. Nothing happened. You can't heal what's already gone. Dad, Goku's head whipped around, hope flaring in his chest, but it was only Gohan's voice coming from the security system's intercom. Right, they'd installed cameras after the Red Ribbon incident. Bulma's idea. With shaking hands, Goku activated the playback system. The timestamp showed 2 hours ago. 2 hours while he was training, while he was getting stronger, while his family was dying and he was nowhere to be found. The screen flickered to life. Chi-Chi was cooking, humming some song under her breath. Goten sat at the kitchen table, working on homework. Normal, perfect. Everything Goku fought to protect. Then the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Frost began forming on the windows. Both Chi-Chi and Goten looked up, confusion replacing contentment on their faces. The thing that appeared in their kitchen wasn't quite human. Tall, gaunt, with skin like granite and eyes that seemed to pull light into themselves. It wore robes that moved like liquid shadow, and when it spoke, its voice carried the echo of dying stars. "Where is Son Goku?" it asked. Chi-Chi stepped in front of Goten without hesitation. "He's not here, leave, now." The creature Goku would learn its name was Malachar later, tilted its head like a curious bird. "His ki residue saturates this place. Pure, powerful, delicious. You are connected to him, aren't you? His mate, his offspring. Get out of our house," Goten shouted, golden ki flaring around him as he powered up. Malachar's laugh was like glass breaking. "Such fire. Yes, I can taste his essence in you both. It will have to suffice until the source returns." What happened next lasted maybe 30 seconds. 30 seconds while Goku was learning a new kata on another world. 30 seconds while his wife and youngest son fought and died for their lives. Chi-Chi tried to activate the emergency beacon Bulma had given her. Goten threw everything he had at the creature, his young ki burning bright and desperate. For a moment, it almost looked like they might have a chance. Then Malachar moved. The recording went dark. Goku stared at the blank screen, his whole body shaking. They'd called for him. In those final moments, he could see Chi-Chi reaching for the beacon, could see Goten's lips forming his name. They died believing he would come. They died waiting for him. The key signature appeared behind him like a cancer in the air, cold and hungry and wrong in every way that mattered. Ah, the source arrives at last. Goku turned slowly. Malachar stood in the doorway, looking exactly as he had in the recording. Except now his skin had a faint golden glow beneath its granite surface, and his empty eyes swirled with familiar energy. You absorbed them. The words came out flat, emotionless. Goku wasn't sure he was capable of feeling anything anymore. Their ki was exquisite, so pure, so warm. But it pales compared to what I sense in you. Malachar stepped into the room, and the very air seemed to recoil from his presence. I am a collector of power, son Goku. I have consumed the life force of 1,000 worlds, but never have I encountered ki like yours. It calls to me. Give them back. Malachar laughed that horrible glass-breaking laugh again. Death is quite permanent, I'm afraid. But their energy lives on in me now. In a way, we are all together forever. Something inside Goku's chest began to crack. I can sense your anguish, Malachar continued, circling him like a predator. Good. Pain purifies ki, makes it more potent. Your grief will make you even more delicious when Goku moved. Not the controlled, precise movements Whis had been teaching him, not the disciplined techniques he'd spent years perfecting. Pure animal rage given form and substance. His fist connected with Malachar's face before the creature could react, sending him crashing through the kitchen wall and into the yard beyond. Goku followed, his ki exploding outward in waves that cracked the ground and sent birds fleeing from every tree in a 5-mile radius. You took them from me. Golden light erupted around Goku as he went Super Saiyan, then deepened to blue as he pushed into God form. You stole my family. Malachar picked himself up from the crater he'd made in the vegetable garden, black blood dripping from his shattered face. Yes, this is what I came for. Your power, your rage, give me more. The creature's own dark energy flared, and suddenly they were trading blows at speeds that turned the air itself into weapons. Each impact sent shockwaves rolling across the countryside. Trees burst into flame from the heat of their battle. The very ground beneath them began to melt. But Goku was beyond caring about collateral damage now. Every punch carried the weight of his grief. Every ki blast was fueled by the memory of Chi-Chi's cold skin, of Goten's lifeless eyes. Malachar was strong, stronger than most opponents Goku had ever faced. Under normal circumstances, it might have been a good fight. But these weren't normal circumstances. Ultra instinct. The transformation washed over him like cold fire. Silver light replaced gold, and suddenly Goku was moving beyond thought, beyond anger, beyond everything except the pure need to destroy the thing that had taken his family. His body flowed around Malachar's attacks like water, striking with surgical precision at every weak point, every gap in defense. The creature's confidence began to crumble as dark blood painted the ruined landscape. Wait, Malachar gasped, staggering backward. I can bring them back. Their ki is still within me. I can return what was taken. Goku paused, silver aura flickering. You can bring them back, hope. The first thing he'd felt besides rage since finding their bodies. Yes, the process is complex but possible. Simply allow me to leave and I will. Goku's hand punched through Malachar's chest before the lie was finished. No, he said quietly, watching the light fade from the creature's eyes. I don't think you will. But as Malachar died, something else happened. The stolen ki he'd absorbed began to leak out, seeking its natural vessels. Goku felt it wash over him, not just Chi-Chi and Goten's energy, but fragments from hundreds of other victims. All of it tainted now, corrupted by its passage through something fundamentally evil. The dark energy tried to integrate with his own ki, and for a moment Goku thought about pushing it away, cleansing himself of the contamination. Then he thought about how strong it would make him. Strong enough to protect everyone who was left, strong enough to make sure this never happened again. He let it in. The change was subtle at first, just a faint purple tinge to his silver aura, a slight chill where there used to be warmth. But Goku could feel something shifting inside him, some fundamental alteration taking place. Goku, Gohan's voice. His eldest son landed in the ruined yard, followed closely by Piccolo and Vegeta. They must have sensed the battle from halfway around the world. "Dad, what happened? Our mom and Goten." Gohan's words died as he saw the house, saw the blood, saw the bodies visible through the broken wall. "I was too late," Goku said, his voice eerily calm. He was still holding Malachar's corpse, dark blood dripping from his fingers. "I was off training while my family was being murdered." "Goku," Piccolo stepped forward carefully, his face pale. In all the years they'd known each other, he'd never seen Goku like this. None of them had. "I won't be too late again." Goku dropped the body and turned to face them. For just a moment, his eyes flashed from silver to deep purple. "I'm going to get strong enough that nothing like this can ever happen. Strong enough to protect everyone." Vegeta's jaw tightened. He could sense the wrongness in Goku's ki now, the way it had been tainted by something alien and hungry. "Kakarot, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking clearly for the first time in my life." Goku looked back at the house, at the blood on his hands, at the ruins of everything he'd held dear. "I've been playing games, holding back, showing mercy to enemies who would kill innocent people the moment my back was turned." He clenched his fists, and reality seemed to shiver around him. Never again. The sun was setting now, painting the sky the color of dried blood. Soon, other friends would arrive. Soon, there would be funerals and condolences and promises that justice would be served. But Goku was already planning. Already thinking about all the threats out there in the universe, all the monsters who might someday decide to visit Earth. All the people who might try to take away what little he had left. He would find them first. He would stop them permanently. And if the universe didn't like his methods, well, the universe could try to stop him. As the first stars appeared overhead, Son Goku made a promise to his dead family, to himself, and to any gods who might be listening. This would never happen again, no matter what it cost. No matter who tried to stand in his way, never again. 3 days later, the entire world seemed to be holding its breath. Goku sat in the front pew of the small temple, wearing the black suit Bulma had brought him. It didn't fit right, too tight in the shoulders, too long in the sleeves, but he hadn't complained. Hadn't said much of anything, really, since that night. The temple was packed. Everyone who had ever fought alongside them was there, along with friends from the old days, neighbors, even some of the politicians who used to call Goku a menace to society. Mr. Satan had closed his entire dojo to attend. Master Roshi sat in the back, openly weeping behind his sunglasses. 2 caskets lay at the front of the temple, surrounded by flowers. Chi-Chi had always loved lilies, so that's what covered hers, white ones that smelled like the garden she'd never get to tend again. Goten's was smaller, covered in sunflowers because he'd always said they looked happy. Gohan stood at the podium, his voice steady despite the tears on his cheeks. "My mother was the strongest person I've ever known," he said, looking out at the sea of faces. Not because she could throw energy blasts or punch through mountains, but because she never stopped believing in the good in people. Even when the world seemed dark, she'd find a way to make it brighter. A few people nodded, wiping their eyes. Goku stared straight ahead, his hands folded in his lap. And Goten, Gohan's voice cracked slightly. Goten was pure joy. He could make anyone smile, even when they didn't want to. He loved training with Dad, loved showing off his new techniques to anyone who would watch. He was going to be something special someday. Was going to be. The words hit Goku like physical blows, but his expression didn't change. He'd run out of tears somewhere around hour 6 of sitting with their bodies, waiting for the coroner to arrive. They died protecting each other, Gohan continued. And they died believing in the values they taught all of us, that love is stronger than hate, that family is worth fighting for, that even in the darkest times there's always hope. Hope. Goku almost smiled at that. Hope was what had kept him training all those years, pushing himself to new heights so he could protect the people he cared about. Hope was what had made him show mercy to enemies who deserved death, believing they might change. Hope had gotten his family killed. After the service, people lingered in the parking lot, sharing memories and offering condolences. Goku stood apart from the crowd, watching Gohan accept hugs and handshakes from people who meant well but couldn't possibly understand. "Goku," he turned to find Vegeta approaching, still wearing his funeral suit but looking uncomfortable in it. The Saiyan prince had never been good with emotions, especially other people's. "The training offer still stands," Vegeta said quietly. "Might help to hit something." Goku nodded. "Tomorrow." "And Goku," Vegeta hesitated, then forged ahead. "What you're feeling right now, I've been there. The rage, the need for revenge. It's not wrong, but don't let it consume you." For the first time in 3 days, Goku's expression shifted slightly. The corner of his mouth twitched upward in what might have been a smile, but there was no warmth in it. Consume me, he repeated. Vegeta, I've never felt more clear-headed in my life. Something in his tone made Vegeta take a step back. There was a coldness there that hadn't existed before, like looking into deep water on a moonless night. Dad? Pan tugged on Goku's pant leg, looking up at him with Gohan's eyes and Vidal's determined expression. She was only 4, too young to really understand what had happened, but old enough to sense that something was wrong. You feel different, Grandpa, she said, tilting her head. Like when the freezer breaks and all the ice cream gets cold and hard. Goku knelt down to her level, and for a moment his expression softened. I'm just sad, Pan. Grandma and Uncle Goten had to go away. Are they coming back? The question hung in the air like a sword. Goku looked at his granddaughter, so small, so innocent, so utterly defenseless against the monsters that lurked in the universe, and felt something twist in his chest. No, he said finally, but I'm going to make sure nothing bad ever happens to you. I promise. Pan seemed to accept this, the way children do when adults make promises they don't really understand. She hugged his neck and ran off to play with Trunks and Marin. Goku watched her go, committing the sight to memory. Another person he couldn't fail. Another life hanging in the balance every time he hesitated to do what was necessary. That night, after everyone had gone home and the temple was empty, Goku found himself sitting alone in the graveyard. 2 fresh headstones stood side by side, the earth still dark from being recently turned. Chi-Chi always said you were a bad influence on me, he said to the graves, his voice barely above a whisper. Said you filled my head with fighting and adventure when I should have been thinking about family. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of flowers and fresh earth. Maybe she was right. Maybe if I'd listened to her more, stayed home more, they'd still be alive. His ki began to rise without him realizing it, purple light mixing with gold as his emotions fought for control. But she's gone now. They're both gone, and I'm done listening to anyone who thinks mercy is more important than results. Goku, King Kai's voice echoed in his mind, urgent and concerned. Goku had been unconsciously broadcasting his thoughts across the telepathic link they shared. King Kai, Goku replied, not bothering to lower his power level. Several nearby tombstones were beginning to crack from the pressure. I felt what happened. I'm so sorry for your loss. Chi-Chi and Goten were good people. Good people who died because I wasn't strong enough to protect them. That's not true, and you know it. You can't be everywhere at once, Goku. Even gods have limits. Goku's laugh was bitter. Limits, right. Well, I'm done accepting limits, King Kai. I'm done accepting that bad things happen to good people while monsters run free. There was a long pause before King Kai responded, his mental voice careful and measured. What are you planning to do, whatever it takes? Goku, listen to me very carefully. The path you're considering, I've seen it before, it never ends well. Power without wisdom, strength without compassion, that's not justice. That's tyranny. And what's the alternative? Goku's power flared and several more tombstones crumbled. Keep playing by rules that only the good guys follow. Keep showing mercy to enemies who will kill innocent people the moment I turn my back. The alternative is finding balance. Using your strength to protect, not to dominate. I tried that. Goku's voice was ice cold now. I've been trying that my whole life, and where did it get me? My wife and son are dead because I was too weak, too soft, too concerned with being fair to monsters who don't deserve fairness. Goku, I'm done with this conversation, King Kai. And I'm done with your philosophy. He severed the mental connection with a thought, leaving King Kai's protests echoing in empty air. The next morning found Goku and Vegeta facing each other in the wasteland where they'd fought so many times before. But something was different now. Where their previous battles had been fierce but ultimately respectful, this felt like standing next to a nuclear reactor that might explode at any moment. You ready, Vegeta? Goku's voice was pleasant, conversational, but Vegeta could see the darkness swirling in his eyes. The corrupted ki from Malachar had been growing, spreading through Goku's system like an infection. Always, Vegeta powered up to Super Saiyan Blue, his aura crackling with electric energy. But maybe we should start slow. You've been through, Goku moved, not the measured, controlled movements of their usual spars. This was violent, predatory, designed to hurt rather than test. His fist caught Vegeta in the ribs with enough force to send him flying across the desert, leaving a mile-long trench in the sand. Vegeta rolled to his feet, gasping. What the hell, Kakarot? Just training, Vegeta. Isn't this what you wanted? Goku's transformation into Super Saiyan Blue was smooth, effortless, but there was something wrong with the color. Instead of the usual pure cyan, dark veins ran through his aura like cracks in ice. They exchanged blows at light speed, each impact sending shockwaves rolling across the landscape. But where their fights used to have an almost dance-like quality, two masters testing each other's limits, this was just brutality. Goku fought like he was trying to kill something. Enough, Vegeta powered down, holding up his hands. Blood trickled from a dozen cuts on his face and arms. This isn't training, Kakarot. This is you working out your anger on me. Goku paused, his corrupted aura still flickering around him. For a moment, something like surprise crossed his features, as if he hadn't realized what he was doing. I'm sorry, he said, powering down as well. I didn't mean to. Yes, you did. Vegeta wiped blood from his mouth. And I understand why, but if you keep going down this path, you're going to become something your family wouldn't recognize. Goku's expression hardened again. My family is dead, Vegeta. What they would think doesn't matter anymore. What about your other family? Gohan, Pan, what about the rest of us who care about you? For just a moment, uncertainty flickered in Goku's eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by that cold determination that was becoming more familiar each day. I'll protect all of you, he said simply, no matter what it costs. That afternoon, while everyone thought he was resting at home, Goku was halfway across the galaxy. He'd spent the morning researching Malachar, using Bulma's computers to trace the creature's path of destruction. What he found made his blood boil. Entire civilizations wiped out, their populations drained of life force to feed one monster's hunger. And Malachar hadn't been working alone. There were others. A whole network of key vampires spread across the universe, feeding on the innocent while heroes like Goku played by rules and worried about collateral damage. The first one he found was on a planet in the Outer Rim, a creature called Vex who had just finished draining a colony of miners. Goku appeared in the middle of its feeding, silver aura blazing with ultra instinct. The fight lasted 30 seconds. Vex tried to run when it realized what it was facing, tried to bargain, tried to explain that it was just following its nature. Goku listened to none of it. His hands moved with surgical precision, tearing the creature apart piece by piece until nothing remained but cosmic dust. The second one put up more of a fight. The third tried to hide. The fourth begged for mercy in the name of its spawn. None of it mattered. By the time Goku returned to Earth, 6 more key vampires had been permanently removed from the universe, and their stolen energy had been absorbed into his own growing power. He landed in his backyard just as the sun was setting, his gi splattered with dark blood that definitely wasn't human. Gohan was waiting for him on the porch, arms crossed and face grim. Where have you been, Dad? Goku looked down at himself at the evidence of his afternoon's work and realized he didn't care if Gohan saw it. Cleaning up loose ends, he said simply. Making sure what happened to Mom and Goten doesn't happen to anyone else. Gohan stared at him for a long moment, taking in the blood, the cold expression, the way his father's ki felt different now, darker, hungrier, wrong in ways he couldn't quite articulate. Dad, he said quietly, what have you done? Goku smiled, and for the first time since the funeral, it reached his eyes. But there was no warmth in it, no joy, just the satisfied expression of a predator who had fed well. I've started keeping my promises, son, and tomorrow I'm going to keep more of them. He walked past Gohan into the house, leaving bloody footprints on Chi-Chi's clean floor. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled despite the clear sky, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The change had begun, and there was no going back. 6 months had passed since the funeral, and Earth felt different now. It wasn't anything you could point to exactly. The sun still rose, people still went about their daily lives, and the Z-Fighters still gathered for their weekly training sessions. But there was an undercurrent of tension, like the feeling before a storm breaks. Goku had become a ghost in his own life. He still lived in the same house, still smiled and waved when neighbors saw him in town, still showed up to family dinners when Gohan insisted. But everyone could feel the change. Where there used to be warmth, there was now something cold and calculating. Where there used to be playful banter during fights, there was now methodical efficiency. And the trips were getting longer. 3 weeks this time, Gohan said, pacing around Bulma's lab while she worked on her latest project. 3 weeks without a word. No one's heard from him, not even King Kai. Bulma didn't look up from her computer screen, but her fingers had stopped typing. Have you tried sensing his Kai? That's the problem. I can feel him, but he's everywhere. 1 minute he's in the Andromeda galaxy, the next he's somewhere I don't even recognize. It's like he's systematically visiting every corner of the universe. Maybe he's just training, Vegeta offered, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it himself. You know how Kakarot gets when he wants to push his limits. This isn't training, Vegeta. Piccolo spoke from his position by the window, arms crossed as he stared out at the city below. I've been meditating on this for weeks, trying to understand what I'm sensing from him. His key. It's not just stronger now, it's different, hungrier. Before anyone could respond, the lab's computers started going crazy. Alarms blared as dozens of screens lit up with incoming transmissions from across the galaxy. The Galactic Patrol's emergency frequency was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Bulma frantically worked the controls, trying to sort through the chaos of overlapping messages. One by one, the transmissions began to resolve into coherent reports. Entire Zephyr system gone, no survivors, just empty planets. Single energy signature before the attack, matches description of Saiyan warrior from Earth. The lab fell silent except for the steady stream of reports. System after system, all with the same story. Planets cleansed of all life by someone matching Goku's description. No demands for surrender. No warnings, just complete and total elimination of anything that might pose a threat. "It can't be him," Gohan whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at Jocko's face. The Galactic Patrolman looked haggard, his usually pristine uniform torn and dirty. "Earth. Thank Zano you're receiving this. We need to talk immediately. It's about Son Goku." "Jocko," Bulma leaned toward the screen. "What's going on out there?" "What's going on is that your friend has declared war on half the galaxy," Jocko said, his voice tight with exhaustion and fear. "In the past 6 months, he's systematically eliminated 47 civilizations that the Galactic Patrol had flagged as potentially hostile to peaceful worlds." The number hit them like a physical blow, 47 civilizations. "Billions of lives. That's impossible," Gohan said. "Dad wouldn't what, kill people?" Jocko's laugh was bitter. "Tell that to the Vorthan Empire, tell that to the Crimson Fleet, tell that to the Skull Legion, all gone. Every last one of them reduced to cosmic dust." Vegeta stepped forward. "Those groups you mentioned, they were all military threats, weren't they? Raiders, conquerors, slavers." "Yes, but that's not the point," Jocko's voice cracked with stress. "Due process exists for a reason, Vegeta. We have courts, we have rehabilitation programs, You have bureaucracy," a new voice said from behind them. Everyone spun around to find Goku standing in the doorway, his orange gi pristine despite having just crossed half the galaxy. But there was something different about him now, something that made the air itself feel heavy. "Dad?" Gohan took a step forward, then stopped. His father's eyes were wrong, still dark brown, still familiar, but there was something looking back at him that wasn't entirely human anymore. "Hello, son." Everyone, Goku walked into the lab like he owned it, his movements casual but predatory. "Jocko, I wasn't expecting to see you here." On the screen, the Galactic Patrolman's face had gone pale. "Goku, we need to talk." "What you've been doing out there?" "What I've been doing," Goku interrupted, "is cleaning up your mess. Do you know how many peaceful worlds those potentially hostile groups had attacked while you were filing paperwork and holding committee meetings? That's not how justice works." "Justice?" Goku's laugh was cold. "Justice is what I found on Kepler-minus 438 billion. A mining colony of families, including children, all drained of their life force by Malachar's associates, while your Galactic Patrol was busy debating jurisdiction." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Goku's ki was rising, but it felt wrong, like standing next to a nuclear reactor that was starting to overheat. "Justice," he continued, "is making sure that never happens again, to anyone. Ever, by committing genocide." Piccolo stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Those weren't all monsters, Goku. Some of those civilizations had families too, children." For just a moment, something flickered in Goku's eyes. Pain, maybe. Regret, then it was gone, buried under layers of cold certainty. "Acceptable losses," he said simply. "Better 1,000 guilty die than one innocent suffer because I hesitated to act." The silence that followed was deafening. This wasn't their Goku talking. The man who had spent his entire life protecting the innocent, who had shown mercy to enemies who didn't deserve it, who had always found another way, he was gone. "What happened to you?" Gohan whispered. Goku looked at his eldest son with something that might have been fondness. "I grew up, Gohan. I stopped believing in fairy tales about redemption and second chances. The universe is full of monsters, and the only way to protect what matters is to eliminate them before they can strike. Like Chi-Chi and Goten were eliminated." The words slipped out before Vegeta could stop them. The change in Goku was immediate and terrifying. His aura exploded outward purple-tinged energy that made the walls of the lab crack and the lights flicker. For a heartbeat, everyone in the room felt the weight of his killing intent, not directed at them, but simply radiating from him like heat from a star. "Don't," he said quietly, "ever compare what I'm doing to what happened to my family. I'm preventing future tragedies, not causing them. By becoming the very thing you used to fight against, Piccolo said, not backing down despite the pressure of Goku's aura. You're not preventing tragedies, Goku, you're creating them. Am I? Goku powered down, his expression returning to that unsettling calm. Tell me, Piccolo, how many raids has the Crimson Fleet conducted since I eliminated them? How many colonies has the Vorthan Empire enslaved? How many innocents have died at the hands of the Skull Legion? None, but exactly none, because dead monsters can't hurt anyone else. Goku turned to look at each of them in turn. I know you don't understand now, I know this is hard to accept, but everything I'm doing is for the greater good. On the screen, Jocko was frantically typing something into his communicator, warning his superiors probably. Calling for backup, it didn't matter. Jocko, Goku said conversationally, I'd like you to deliver a message to the Galactic King for me. Goku, please, just listen. Tell him that effective immediately, I'm taking personal responsibility for galactic security. No more committees, no more bureaucracy, no more letting monsters slip through the cracks while good people suffer. The Galactic Patrolman's eyes widened in horror. You can't be serious. I'm talking about peace, Goku said firmly. Real peace. The kind that only comes when everyone understands that harming innocents has consequences. Immediate, permanent consequences. You're talking about tyranny, Goku shrugged. Call it whatever you want. Results are what matter, not labels. Jocko was shaking his head frantically. The Galactic Patrol will never accept this. We have laws, we have procedures. You have 1 week, Goku interrupted, his voice taking on an edge that made everyone in the room tense up. 1 week to prove your system works. Show me justice for every innocent who died while you were following procedures. Show me rehabilitation for every monster who was given a second chance only to kill again. That's impossible and you know it. Then I guess you've proven my point. Goku's smile was sharp as a blade. After 1 week, I'll start doing your job properly, starting with the most wanted criminals in your database and working my way down. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving them staring at a blank screen. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Dad, Gohan finally said, you can't do this. This isn't justice, it's madness. Is it? Goku turned to face him, and for a moment he looked like the father Gohan remembered, tired maybe, sad, but still human. Let me ask you something, son. If you could go back in time and stop every villain we've ever faced before they hurt anyone, would you do it? That's different. How? How is it different? Cell killed thousands before we stopped him. Majin Buu destroyed entire planets. Frieza genocided entire races. And we let them do it because we wanted to be fair, because we believed in giving them chances to surrender. Goku's aura began to rise again, but this time it felt like standing in the presence of something vast and alien. Well, I'm done being fair. I'm done giving chances to monsters who will just use them to hurt more people. The universe is going to learn that there are consequences for evil, and those consequences are permanent. And who decides what's evil? Vegeta demanded. You, what gives you the right? I'm the strongest, Goku said simply. That gives me the right, that makes it my responsibility. The casual way he said it was somehow more terrifying than any threat would have been. This wasn't rage talking or grief or madness. This was cold, calculated certainty. The Galactic Patrol has 1 week, Goku continued. After that, I start implementing my own vision of justice. Anyone who wants to stand in my way is welcome to try. He looked around the room one last time, his gaze lingering on Gohan. I hope you'll understand someday. Everything I'm doing to protect the people I care about. To make sure what happened to Mom and Goten never happens again. What about what's happening to you? Gohan asked desperately. You're losing yourself, Dad, can't you see that? For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across Goku's features. Then he shook his head. I'm not losing myself, Gohan. I'm finally becoming who I was always meant to be. He pressed 2 fingers to his forehead, preparing to use instant transmission. Give my love to Pan. Tell her grandpa is working very hard to make the universe safe for her. Goku, wait, but he was already gone, leaving behind only the lingering smell of ozone and the crushing weight of what he'd become. On the blank screen where Jocko's transmission had been, a new message appeared in Galactic Patrol emergency code. Priority Alpha Alert. Sun Goku of Earth classified as Galactic Threat Level Omega. All patrol units maintain safe distance. Repeat, do not engage. Vegeta stared at the message for a long moment, then laughed bitterly. Galactic Threat Level Omega. They don't even have a classification higher than that. Because they never thought they'd need one, Piccolo said quietly. They never imagined someone like Goku would choose this path. Gohan collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. We have to stop him. How? Bulma asked. He's stronger than all of us combined, and he's not going to listen to reason. Then we find another way, Gohan said, lifting his head with grim determination. We find a way to save him from himself, before he destroys everything good he ever stood for. Outside, thunder rolled across the clear sky, as if the heavens themselves were weeping for what Son Goku had become. And somewhere in the depths of space, Jocko's patrol ship hung motionless as its pilot stared at his communicator in horror. The week countdown had already begun, and across the galaxy, every criminal organization, every pirate fleet, every would-be conqueror was about to learn what real fear felt like. Justice was coming, and it wore an orange gi. The week passed like a held breath. Across the galaxy, every major criminal organization went dark. Pirate fleets that had terrorized trade routes for decades simply vanished overnight. Slave markets that had operated for centuries fell silent. The most wanted fugitives in Galactic patrol history disappeared one by one, leaving behind nothing but empty ships and the lingering echo of screams. Jocko hadn't slept in 4 days. "Sir, we're receiving another distress signal," his junior officer reported, voice cracking with exhaustion. "It's from the Helix Nebula. The Draconian Syndicate's main base." Jocko corrected automatically. It was their main base. On the main screen, the smoking ruins of what had once been a massive space station drifted in the void. No survivors, no escape pods. Just twisted metal and the kind of destruction that could only come from someone with the power to crack planets. "That's the 43rd confirmed elimination in 6 days, the officer continued. "Sir, at this rate, every major criminal organization in the known galaxy will be extinct by next week," Jocko finished. "And then he'll start on the minor ones." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what came after that. Then who would Goku consider a threat? "Sir, incoming transmission from Earth." Jocko straightened in his chair, hoping against hope that it was good news. Maybe Goku's friends had talked sense into him. Maybe Bulma's face appeared on the screen, but she looked haggard, aged beyond her years. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually perfect hair was a disheveled mess. "Jocko, thank Kami you're alive. We need to talk. Bulma, please tell me you have good news." Her expression told him everything he needed to know. "He's not just eliminating criminals anymore, Jocko. 3 hours ago, Goku conquered the entire Valdrus system." The words hit like a physical blow. Valdrus was a peaceful federation of 7 planets, known throughout the galaxy for their art and philosophy. They'd never hurt anyone. "Conquered?" Jocko's voice came out as a whisper. "Their government tried to refuse his protection. So he demonstrated what refusing meant by turning their smallest moon into dust with a single key blast. Then he gave them a choice. Accept him as their supreme ruler or join the moon." On the screen, Bulma's hands were shaking. They chose to live. All 7 worlds are now under his direct control, with governors he appointed to enforce his will. Governors, that's what he's calling them. "But Jocko," Bulma's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. "They're not human. They're not even recognizably alive anymore. It's like he found the worst criminals he could, the ones so twisted they couldn't be rehabilitated, and turned them into his personal enforcers." Before Jocko could respond, another alarm sounded throughout the ship. His sensor officer looked up from his station, face pale. "Sir, massive energy signature detected. It's him. He's heading for the Cortex system." Jocko closed his eyes. The Cortex system housed the Galactic Patrol Academy, where new officers trained, where his own nephew was currently a cadet. "All ships maintain distance," he ordered. "Do not engage. Repeat. Do not engage, sir. The Academy." "I know," Jocko's voice was hollow. "But we can't stop him. No one can." On Earth, similar conversations were happening in Capsule Corp's command center. Every screen showed the same horrifying story. World after world falling under Goku's control, their populations given the choice between submission and extinction. Most chose submission. "He's not even trying to hide it anymore," Piccolo said, watching footage from a security camera on New Namek. The planet hadn't been conquered yet, but Goku's governors had visited as a warning. The creatures were barely recognizable as having once been living beings, their bodies twisted into instruments of terror and control. "What are those things?" Gohan asked, though part of him was afraid he already knew. "War criminals," Vegeta answered grimly. "The worst of the worst. Somehow he's keeping them alive past the point where they should have died and turning them into extensions of his will." On the screen, one of the creatures, something that might have once been a member of Frieza's race, was addressing the Namekian elders. Its voice was the sound of grinding metal and dying stars. "Lord Goku offers you his protection," it said, the words physically painful to hear. Submit willingly, and your people will be safe under his rule. Refuse and learn why 47 civilizations chose extinction over his displeasure. Elder Murray stepped forward, his aged face creased with worry but still defiant. We will not bow to tyranny, no matter who wears its face. The creature's laugh was like breaking glass. Tyranny? You misunderstand. This is salvation. Under Lord Goku's rule, there will be no more war, no more crime, no more suffering. Only order and freedom, another Namekian elder asked. Freedom is what allowed monsters to murder Lord Goku's family, the creature replied. Freedom is chaos, order is peace. The transmission cut to static, but they all knew what came next. New Namek would fall within hours, and its people would learn what Goku's version of peace truly meant. We have to do something, Gohan said, his voice tight with frustration. We can't just sit here and watch him destroy everything we've fought to protect. Against Kakarot as he is now, Vegeta shook his head, we'd last maybe 5 minutes. Less if he's developed whatever new powers he used to create those things. Then we get stronger, Gohan said with sudden determination. All of us, fast. Before anyone could respond, the air in the room began to vibrate. Not from any machine or outside force, but from the sheer presence of enormous key signatures approaching Earth. No, Piccolo breathed. It can't be. But it was. On every screen, on every sensor, the same impossible reading. Android 17 and Android 18 were returning to Earth, and their power levels were off the charts. They materialized in the Capsule Corp courtyard without ceremony, their clothes singed and their faces grim. But there was something different about them now, something that made the air around them shimmer with barely contained energy. We need to talk, 17 said as he walked into the building, not bothering to wait for an invitation. Tried to stop him, didn't you? Vegeta asked, taking in their appearance. 3 days ago, 18 confirmed, collapsing into a chair. He was liberating a solar system near where we'd been exploring. 12 inhabited planets, all of them peaceful trading worlds. What happened? Bulma asked, though she was already dreading the answer. We told him to stop, 17 said simply. Explain that these people weren't threats to anyone. They had families, children, art, culture, everything worth protecting. And he listened. Then he asked us if we were going to interfere with his mission to create universal peace. 17's expression darkened. When we said yes, he tried to kill us. The room went dead silent. Goku had never tried to kill the androids, not even during their worst conflicts. He'd always found another way. How did you survive? Gohan asked. Barely, 18 said, rolling up her sleeve to reveal deep scars that were still healing. Whatever he's become, he's not just stronger than before. He's different, faster, more ruthless, and his key, she shuddered. It felt like standing next to a black hole, like something that consumes everything it touches. He's developed a new transformation, 17 continued. Ultra instinct mixed with something else, something dark. His body moves without conscious thought, but instead of defending, it only knows how to destroy. Dark ultra instinct, Piccolo murmured. The corruption has reached even his most perfect technique. We barely escaped, 18 said. And only because he let us go. At the end, when we were broken and helpless, he just looked at us with something like pity and said we had 24 hours to get off his planet before he changed his mind. His planet, Vegeta's voice was sharp. That's what he called it, his planet, like he already owned it. 17 clenched his fists. Those 12 worlds are under his control now, billions of people living in fear of their protector. Before anyone could respond, a new presence filled the room. Not through the door, not through any physical means. One moment they were alone, the next Whis was standing among them, his usual serene expression replaced by something approaching concern. Lord Whis, Gohan said, hope flickering in his voice. Please tell me you're here to help. I'm here to warn you, Whis replied, his voice uncharacteristically grave. Lord Beerus is troubled by recent events. Troubled enough to actually do something about it? Vegeta asked. Whis was quiet for a long moment. 3 days ago, Goku's power signature reached a level that woke Lord Beerus from his nap. That has never happened before. The implications of that statement settled over them like a shroud. For Goku's power to wake Beerus meant he was approaching the level of gods of destruction. Is Beerus going to stop him? Bulma asked. Lord Beerus is conflicted, Whis admitted. On one hand, Goku is bringing order to the universe in a way that hasn't been seen in millions of years. Crime rates are at historic lows. Galactic conflicts have essentially ceased. Because everyone's too terrified to fight, Piccolo pointed out. Nevertheless, it is effective. On the other hand, Whis paused, seeming to struggle with his words. There are certain universal constants that must be maintained. balance between order and chaos, between creation and destruction. Goku is tipping that balance in dangerous ways. So what happens now? Gohan asked. Lord Beerus has decided to observe for now, but if Goku continues on his current path, if his power continues to grow at this rate. Whis trailed off. What? Vegeta demanded. Then Lord Beerus will have no choice but to treat him as what he's becoming, a threat to universal stability that must be eliminated. The weight of those words settled over them. Even Beerus, with all his godly power, was considering Goku a threat significant enough to destroy. How long do we have? Gohan asked quietly. Hard to say, but not long. Goku's power growth has accelerated beyond anything we've seen before. Each world he conquers, each enemy he absorbs makes him stronger. At this rate, Whis shook his head. He'll surpass Lord Beerus within months, possibly weeks. And then he becomes the most powerful being in this universe. And power like that, corrupted as his has become, Whis didn't need to finish the sentence. A new alarm sounded, this one from the deepest levels of Capsule Corp's monitoring systems. On the main screen, a familiar orange-clad figure appeared, standing in the ruins of what had once been the Galactic Patrol's central headquarters. Goku looked directly into the camera, his smile cold and predatory. Hello, Earth. I hope you've been following the news. As you can see, I've been busy bringing peace to our galaxy. But now it's time to come home. Behind him, the twisted forms of his governors stood in perfect formation, their very presence making the air shimmer with malevolent energy. I've learned so much during my travels. About the nature of power, about the necessity of order, about what it really takes to protect the innocent. His eyes seemed to look directly at each of them through the screen. And now I'm ready to share those lessons with the place I care about most. The image shifted, showing a massive fleet of ships approaching Earth. Not ships of any design they recognized. These looked organic, grown rather than built, pulsing with dark energy. Earth is going to be the capital of the new universal order I'm creating. A shining example of what peace really looks like when someone with the power to enforce it actually cares about results. Goku's smile widened, and for a moment his eyes flashed that terrible purple-black of corrupted divine ki. I'll be home soon. I suggest you all prepare accordingly. The transmission cut to black, leaving them staring at their own terrified reflections in the dark screen. How long until he arrives? Gohan asked, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Bulma's fingers flew over her keyboard, calculating trajectories and energy signatures. At his current speed, 6 hours, maybe less. Gohan stood up, his expression hardening into something that reminded them all of Goku at his most determined. But this was different. This was a son preparing to fight his father, possibly to the death. Then we have 6 hours to get ready, he said simply. Piccolo, I need you to contact every fighter on Earth. Tien, Yamcha, Krillin, everyone. Tell them what's coming. Gohan, Vegeta started, and I need you to help me with something, Gohan continued, turning to face the Saiyan Prince. I need you to help me get strong enough to stop him. In 6 hours. That's impossible. Then we'd better figure out how to make it possible. Gohan's ki began to rise, white energy crackling around him as he pushed toward his mystic form. Because if we don't, there won't be an Earth left to save. Outside, storm clouds were gathering despite the weather forecast calling for clear skies. The very planet seemed to sense what was coming, not just the return of its greatest protector, but the arrival of something that had once been Son Goku and was now something else entirely. Something that looked at peace and saw only the silence of the grave. Something that looked at freedom and saw only chaos to be controlled. Something that was coming home to remake the world in its own twisted image of perfection. The Age of Heroes was over. The Age of Order was about to begin. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of West City had seen better days. Rusted metal beams stretched toward a ceiling full of holes, and weeds grew through cracks in the concrete floor. But it was isolated, shielded from sensors, and most importantly, it was the last place anyone would expect Earth's remaining heroes to gather. Gohan stood before the assembled group, his mystic aura casting long shadows on the walls. In the 5 hours since Goku's transmission, he'd managed to contact everyone who was still willing to fight. The turnout was smaller than he'd hoped. Krillin sat on a stack of old crates, his bald head gleaming with nervous sweat. Tien and Chaozu occupied a corner, the three-eyed warrior's face set in grim determination. Yamcha leaned against a pillar, trying to look casual but failing to hide the fear in his eyes. Master Roshi had surprised everyone by showing up, his usual perverted demeanor replaced by something Gohan had never seen before, genuine anger. Piccolo stood apart from the others, his cape billowing despite the still air inside the warehouse. Androids 17 and 18 flanked him, their mechanical features showing more emotion than usual. And next to the entrance, Vegeta stood with his arms crossed, his pride warring with the reality of what they were facing. "Thank you all for coming," Gohan began, his voice carrying the weight of leadership he'd never wanted but now had to accept. "I know this isn't easy. I know some of you are thinking this is hopeless." "Because it is hopeless," Yamcha said, not unkindly. "Gohan, we all saw what he did to 17 and 18. They're stronger than most of us put together, and he barely broke a sweat." "Yamcha's right," Krillin added, wringing his hands. "I mean, this is Goku we're talking about. Even before whatever happened to him, he was already the strongest person any of us knew. Now he's something else entirely," Tien finished. "Something that needs to be stopped, no matter the cost." The three-eyed warrior's words hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone knew what he was really saying. They might have to kill their oldest friend to save everyone else. "There has to be another way," Gohan said, though his voice lacked the conviction it once held. "He's still my father, somewhere inside that thing. The real Goku is still there." "Is he?" Piccolo's question was gentle but relentless. "Gohan, I've been sensing his ki for months now. Whatever corruption took hold after Chi-Chi and Goten died, it's not getting better. It's getting worse, spreading." Before anyone could respond, a new voice cut through the discussion. "He's right, you know." Everyone spun toward the source of the voice, energy flaring as they prepared for battle. But instead of one of Goku's governors or some new threat, they found themselves facing a figure none of them had expected to see again. Cell, but not as they remembered him. This Cell looked tired. His usually perfect bio-android features were marked with scars that hadn't fully healed, and there was something in his red eyes that looked almost human. "Relax," he said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "If I wanted you dead, half of you would be already." Vegeta's ki exploded outward, his hair flashing golden. "What are you doing here, you bastard?" "The same thing you are, Prince. Trying to figure out how to stop Son Goku from destroying everything worth preserving in this universe." The statement was so unexpected that everyone just stared at him for a moment. "You're opposing him?" Gohan asked carefully. Cell's laugh was bitter. "Opposing him? No, that would imply I have some chance of success. I'm hiding from him, same as everyone else with half a brain and a survival instinct." "Why should we trust anything you say?" 17 demanded, his infinite energy beginning to crackle around him. "Because," Cell said simply, "he killed me 3 days ago." That stopped all conversation cold. "Killed you how?" Piccolo asked. "You're obviously still here." "Barely." Cell touched one of the scars on his chest, and for the first time since they'd known him, he looked genuinely afraid. "I was hiding in the Outer Rim, trying to avoid the various heroes and law enforcement agencies hunting me. Minding my own business, you might say." He paused, as if reliving a particularly unpleasant memory. "Then he found me. Not through any search or tracking, mind you, he just appeared like he'd always known exactly where I was." "What did he want?" Krillin asked, despite himself. "To recruit me." Cell's voice dropped to a whisper. "He offered me a place in his new order, said my unique talents would be useful for maintaining discipline among his subjects." Cell looked around the room, making eye contact with each of them. "When I refused, he didn't get angry, didn't threaten me. He just smiled that cold smile of his and said, 'I was hoping you'd say that. I need to make an example anyway.'" The bio-android's perfect composure cracked slightly. "Do you know what it feels like to be completely destroyed at the cellular level and then pulled back from oblivion just so you can experience it again? He killed me 17 times in 17 different ways, each more creative than the last. And every time, just as I was about to finally die, he dragged me back." The warehouse was dead silent except for the distant sound of wind through broken windows. "The 18th time," Cell continued, he stopped. "Just looked at me lying there in pieces and said, 'Now you understand what real power looks like. You have 24 hours to reconsider my offer.'" "So why are you here instead of serving him?" Vegeta asked, though his aggressive stance had relaxed slightly. "Because I've seen what happens to the ones who accept." Cell's expression became haunted. "Those governors of his, they used to be people like me, powerful, proud, convinced of their own superiority. Now they're just extensions of his will. Puppets dancing to music only he can hear." He looked directly at Gohan. "Your father doesn't want allies anymore, he wants tools, and when a tool breaks," Cell gestured to his scars, "well, there are always more tools to be found." Before anyone could respond to that chilling statement, Bulma's voice crackled through the communicators they all wore. "Guys, we've got a problem. He's early." Goku's fleet just entered Earth's atmosphere, and they're heading straight for major population centers. On the small screens built into their communicators, they could see the organic ships descending from orbit like falling stars. Each one was easily the size of a city block, and there were dozens of them. ETA to West City? Gohan asked, switching into combat mode. 12 minutes, Bulma replied. But Gohan, he's not on any of the ships. I can't find his key signature anywhere. A new voice cut through the transmission. Familiar, warm, and absolutely terrifying in its casual friendliness. That's because I'm already here. Everyone spun around to find Goku standing in the doorway of the warehouse, his orange gi pristine and his hands clasped behind his back. He looked exactly the same as he always had, except for his eyes. Those dark brown eyes that had always held such warmth now looked like windows into an Arctic night. "Hello, everyone," he said pleasantly, as if he'd just walked in on a birthday party instead of a resistance meeting. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced." The warehouse exploded into motion. Energy blasts filled the air as everyone attacked at once, pouring everything they had into a desperate alpha strike. The building shook under the assault, steel beams melting from the heat of multiple key attacks. When the smoke cleared, Goku was still standing in the same spot, completely unharmed. He hadn't even moved to dodge. "Are you finished?" he asked mildly. "Because we have a lot to discuss." Vegeta snarled and transformed into Super Saiyan Blue, his aura crackling with electric energy. "We're just getting started, Kakarot." The prince launched himself forward at maximum speed, his pride overriding his strategic sense. His fist connected with Goku's face with enough force to level a mountain. Goku's head moved maybe an inch. "Vegeta," he said sadly, not even bothering to block the follow-up attacks that came in a blur of motion. "I had hoped you would understand. Of all people, I thought the Prince of Saiyans would appreciate the value of order." Vegeta's attacks weren't even registering. Each punch that should have shattered bones simply bounced off Goku's skin like hitting solid steel. "You're not a Saiyan anymore," Vegeta panted, continuing his futile assault. "You're something else, something wrong." "I'm something better," Goku replied, catching Vegeta's next punch with casual ease. "I'm what a Saiyan becomes when he stops playing games and starts taking responsibility." With a gentle push, he sent Vegeta flying backward into a concrete pillar hard enough to crack the stone. The others resumed their attack, working in coordination now instead of panic. Piccolo stretched his arms to impossible lengths while firing key blasts from his fingertips. Tien split into multiple copies, each one attacking from a different angle. Krillin's Destructo discs filled the air like deadly frisbees. None of it mattered. Goku moved through their attacks like he was dancing, each step perfectly calculated to avoid anything that might actually threaten him while positioning himself to counter. Within seconds, Tien's copies were dispelled, Piccolo was wrapped in his own stretched limbs, and Krillin was pinned to the wall by his own reflected attack. "Please stop," Goku said, his voice carrying genuine sadness. "You're only hurting yourselves." Gohan stepped forward, his mystic power flaring around him like white fire. "Dad, please, look what you're doing, look what you've become." For just a moment, something flickered in Goku's eyes. Pain, maybe. "Regret, I'm looking at my son," he said softly. "My brilliant, powerful son who still thinks the universe runs on fairness and second chances." His expression hardened again. "The same son who's about to make the same mistakes I made." "What mistakes?" Gohan demanded, his power continuing to rise. "Showing mercy, believing people can change, letting monsters live long enough to hurt innocent people." Goku's aura began to manifest, that terrible silver-purple energy that made the air itself feel poisonous. "Do you want to know how many people Cell killed while we were giving him chances to surrender? How many died on Namek while I was playing with Frieza? That's not. How many more would have died if I had just finished them quickly instead of making it about my pride?" Goku's voice rose slightly, the first real emotion he'd shown. "How many Chi-Chis and Gotens died because I was too concerned with being the good guy to do what was necessary?" Gohan's power peaked, his mystic form pushing toward something new. Golden energy began to mix with the white, and for a moment everyone in the warehouse could feel it, the birth of something that had never existed before. "Mystic God," Piccolo breathed, recognizing the transformation instinctively. But even as Gohan achieved a new level of power that dwarfed his previous limits, Goku just nodded approvingly. "Very good, son. You're finally starting to understand what real strength looks like." He raised one finger, and reality seemed to bend around it. "But you're still not ready for the lesson I need to teach." Dark Ultra instinct washed over him like spilled ink, and suddenly he wasn't just standing in the warehouse anymore. He was everywhere and nowhere, moving between one position and another without crossing the space in between. Gohan's enhanced senses could barely track him, but he tried anyway, throwing punches and ki blasts at speeds that turned the air into plasma. For a few seconds, it almost looked like he might be holding his own. Then Goku appeared behind him, one hand resting gently on his shoulder. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly, just before the pressure point strike that dropped Gohan like a puppet with cut strings. The others tried to rush him, but it was already over. Moving with that impossible dark ultra instinct speed, Goku had disabled half of them before they could react and contain the rest in barriers of pure ki. "I'm not going to hurt any of you," he said, looking around at his captured friends with something that might have been fondness. "But I can't let you interfere with what needs to happen next." "Which is what?" Piccolo demanded from within his energy prison. "Earth's integration into the new galactic order." Goku walked over to where Gohan lay unconscious and gently picked him up. "Don't worry, the process is completely painless for those who cooperate. And for those who don't?" Yamcha asked, though he was pretty sure he didn't want to know the answer. Goku's smile was sharp as winter. "Well, that depends on how much they value their free will." He looked around the warehouse one last time, taking in the faces of people who had once been his closest friends and allies. "You'll understand eventually," he said. "When Earth is safe from every possible threat, when there's no more war or crime or suffering of any kind, you'll thank me for making the hard choices you were all too weak to make." "This isn't strength," Cell said from his own energy prison, speaking for the first time since the fight began. "This is fear. You're so terrified of losing anyone else that you're willing to destroy everything that made them worth saving in the first place." For just a moment, Goku's composure slipped. The energy barriers flickered and his aura sputtered like a candle in the wind. Then the moment passed and his expression returned to that terrible calm. "Fear," he laughed, but there was no humor in it. "No, Cell, this is love. The kind of love that's willing to be hated if it means keeping the people you care about safe." He pressed 2 fingers to his forehead, preparing to teleport away with his unconscious son. "Those of you who are left have a choice to make. You can join me willingly and help build something better than this chaotic mess we call civilization. Or you can continue to oppose me and learn why 47 civilizations chose extinction over prolonged resistance." The warehouse fell silent, except for the distant sound of his organic ships landing in the city. "Choose wisely," Goku said. "I won't offer again." Then he was gone, taking Gohan with him and leaving the others trapped in their energy prisons with only their growing despair for company. Outside, the conquest of Earth had begun. And in the ruins of their resistance movement, the remaining heroes began to understand just how hopeless their situation really was. The universe's greatest protector had become its greatest threat, and there was no one left strong enough to stop him. Gohan woke up to the sound of screaming, not the panicked screams of people in immediate danger. He'd heard those enough times to recognize them instantly. These were different, methodical, almost routine, like someone going through a checklist. His head throbbed where his father had struck the pressure point, but his vision cleared quickly. Saiyan physiology had its advantages, even if he was only half-blooded. He was lying on something soft, a bed, he realized, in what looked like a luxurious apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows dominated one wall, offering a panoramic view of West City. Or what West City had become in the 6 hours since he'd been unconscious. The skyline was wrong. Where familiar buildings should have stood, massive organic structures now pulsed with dark energy. They looked grown rather than built, like enormous tumors sprouting from the earth. Streets that had once bustled with normal human activity were now eerily organized. People moved in perfect lines, their faces blank, their movements synchronized. And floating above it all, like dark angels of judgment, were his father's governors. "Impressive, isn't it?" Gohan spun around to find Goku sitting in a chair by the window, still wearing that same pristine orange gi. He was holding a cup of tea, steam rising from the surface like incense. 6 hours, Goku continued conversationally, and already Earth's crime rate has dropped to 0. No more muggings, no more domestic violence, no more corruption in government. Amazing what a little organization can accomplish. Gohan moved to the window, pressing his face against the glass. Down below, he could see a group of people being herded toward one of the organic structures by creatures that had once been human. The people weren't resisting. They weren't even showing emotion. "What did you do to them?" he whispered. "I freed them," Goku said simply, "from the burden of making choices that might lead to suffering, from the chaos of free will that creates nothing but pain and conflict. You're controlling their minds. I'm providing guidance." Goku set down his teacup and joined Gohan at the window. Look at them, son, really look. When's the last time you saw people this peaceful, this content? Gohan stared down at the synchronized crowds, searching their faces for any sign of the individuals they'd once been. They're not content, Dad, they're empty. Emptiness is preferable to anguish. Goku's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. I've felt both, Gohan, I know which one I'd choose. Before Gohan could respond, another scream echoed from somewhere below them. This one was different, full of terror and recognition. What was that? Gohan demanded. Processing, Goku replied matter-of-factly. Some people require more intensive guidance than others. Those who refuse to accept the new order voluntarily. The casual way he said it made Gohan's blood run cold. You're torturing them. I'm teaching them. Goku turned to face his son, and for a moment his expression softened. Gohan, I know this is hard to understand, but everything I'm doing for the greater good, for people like you and Pan. Pan, the name hit Gohan like a physical blow. Where is she? Safe. Videl and Pan are in protective custody until the integration process is complete. They won't be harmed, I promise you that. Let me see them. Soon. Goku walked back to his chair, moving with that predatory grace that had become so familiar. First, we need to talk. You and I have a lot to discuss. Gohan's ki began to rise, golden energy crackling around him as he prepared to power up. There's nothing to discuss. What you're doing is wrong, and I'm going to stop you. With what? Goku asked, genuinely curious. The power you showed earlier, that new transformation, it's impressive, I'll grant you that. But it's nowhere near enough to challenge me. Then I'll get stronger. How? By training for years while billions suffer under the old chaotic system. By repeating the same mistakes I made, always being too late, always arriving after the damage is done. Goku leaned forward, his eyes burning with that cold fire. I was too late to save your mother and brother, Gohan. Too late because I was off playing games with an angel instead of being where my family needed me. Do you really want to follow that same path? The words hit harder than any physical attack could have. Gohan felt his transformation waver as doubt crept in. How many times had he arrived too late to prevent some tragedy? How many people had died while he was holding back, trying to find a better way? That's different, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Goku stood up, and suddenly the room felt much smaller. Tell me, son, if you could have prevented every villain we've ever faced from hurting anyone, would you have done it? Of course, but no buts. Yes or no? If you could have stopped Cell before he killed anyone, if you could have prevented Buu from destroying entire populations, if you could have eliminated Frieza before he committed his first genocide, would you have done it? Gohan was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with the question. If there was no other way, then yes. Then you understand. Goku smiled, but it was the smile of a teacher whose student had finally grasped a difficult concept. The only difference between us is that I'm strong enough to actually do something about it. The difference, Gohan said, his power beginning to rise again, is that I wouldn't become a monster to fight monsters. Monster? Goku's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Is that what you think I am? Look around, Dad, look at what you've done. You've turned Earth into a prison camp. I've turned Earth into paradise, Goku corrected. No more crime, no more war, no more suffering. Everyone has food, shelter, purpose. What part of that makes me a monster? The part where you took away their choice. For just a moment, something flickered in Goku's eyes. Pain, maybe, or the ghost of the man he used to be. Choice? He repeated softly. Do you know what choice gave us, Gohan? It gave us Frieza choosing to destroy planets for entertainment. It gave us Cell choosing to torture his victims before killing them. It gave us Majin Buu choosing to turn entire civilizations into candy. His aura began to manifest, that terrible silver-purple energy that made reality itself seem unstable. And it gave Malachar the choice to murder my wife and youngest son while I was off training. The pressure in the room became crushing. Gohan felt his knees buckle under the weight of his father's power, but he forced himself to remain standing. So yes, Goku continued, I took away their choice. Because choice without wisdom leads to chaos, and chaos leads to suffering, and I'm done watching innocent people suffer because of other people's choices. Including mine, Gohan managed to gasp out. Especially yours. Goku's power reached its peak, and suddenly the apartment around them began to dissolve. Not physically, the walls and furniture remained solid, but Gohan could sense they were being transported somewhere else, somewhere that existed outside normal space. When the sensation stopped, they were standing on a platform floating in the void between stars. Below them, Gohan could see Earth spinning slowly, its surface covered with the same organic structures that had infected West City. The planet looked like it was diseased. "Welcome to my throne room," Goku said casually. "I thought you might appreciate the view." Gohan stared at his transformed home world, feeling sick. "What have you done? I've perfected it." Goku gestured toward Earth with something approaching pride. "Every major city is now a perfect example of order and efficiency. Crime doesn't exist because criminals are processed before they can act. War is impossible because all military forces report directly to me. Poverty is eliminated because everyone has a role in the new system. And free will is what destroyed everything I cared about," Goku said simply. "So I removed it." That's when Gohan snapped. His mystic god transformation exploded outward golden-white energy that lit up the void like a newborn star. The platform they stood on cracked under the pressure, but held together through sheer force of will, Goku's will. "I won't let you do this," Gohan snarled, his voice distorted by the power coursing through him. "I won't let you destroy everything that makes life worth living." "Then stop me," Goku said, his own dark ultra instinct beginning to manifest. "Show me that the old way was better. Prove that chaos and choice are worth preserving." They moved simultaneously. The battle that followed wasn't like anything either of them had ever experienced before. This wasn't a sparring match between father and son, wasn't even the desperate fight against some external enemy. This was a philosophical argument conducted through violence, each strike carrying the weight of their fundamental disagreement about how the universe should work. Gohan's new transformation pushed him beyond anything he'd achieved before. His mystic abilities, enhanced by divine ki, let him match his father's speed for the first time in years. Golden energy met dark silver in explosions that sent shockwaves rippling through the void. But even as he fought with everything he had, Gohan could feel the futility of it. His father wasn't just stronger, he was operating on a completely different level. Dark Ultra Instinct let Goku's body react to threats that hadn't even formed yet, countering attacks that existed only in potential. "You're holding back," Goku observed, weaving between a barrage of ki blasts that should have been impossible to dodge. "Still worried about hurting your dear old dad," Gohan responded by doubling his output, pouring every ounce of power he had into a sustained assault. For a few seconds, it almost looked like he might break through. His father's defense faltered, and one of his punches actually connected, sending Goku skidding backward across the platform. "Better," Goku said, wiping a thin trickle of blood from his lip, "but still not enough." The counterattack came faster than Gohan could process. One moment he was pressing his advantage, the next he was flat on his back with his father's foot pressing down on his chest. "Do you see now?" Goku asked, applying just enough pressure to make breathing difficult. "This is what real power looks like, the power to protect what matters, no matter who stands in your way." Gohan struggled against the pin, but it was useless. His transformation was fading, his energy spent. "You're not protecting anything," he gasped. "You're destroying it. I'm preserving it in the only way that works." Goku knelt down beside his son, his expression almost gentle. "Gohan, you're strong, stronger than I was at your age, but strength without purpose is just chaos waiting to happen." "And what's your purpose, Dad? Control, power, love." The word came out so softly that Gohan almost missed it. "Everything I do out of love. Love for you, for Pan, for everyone who deserves to live in a universe where monsters can't hurt them." For just a moment, looking up at his father's face, Gohan could see it. The pain. The grief, the desperate need to prevent anyone else from experiencing what he'd gone through. "Dad," he said quietly, "this isn't love, this is fear." Goku's expression hardened again. "Fear keeps people alive. Love gets them killed." He stood up, releasing the pressure on Gohan's chest. "I had hoped you would understand, that you would join me willingly and help build something better than the chaos we left behind. Never. Then you'll be processed like the others." Goku turned away, looking out at the diseased earth below. "It's not painful, Gohan. You'll simply stop wanting things that cause conflict. Stop caring about concepts that lead to suffering. You mean you'll turn me into one of your puppets? I'll turn you into someone who can't be hurt by the universe's cruelty." Goku's voice carried a note of genuine sadness. "Someone who can't make the mistakes I made." Gohan struggled to his feet, his body screaming in protest, but his will unbroken. "I'd rather die first." "Death is permanent," Goku replied. "Processing is reversible. If I'm wrong, if somehow your chaotic way of doing things proves superior, I can always change you back." "You really believe that, don't you?" Gohan stared at his father with something approaching pity. "You actually think there's still something left of you worth saving?" For the first time since the conversation began, Goku's composure cracked completely. His aura flared with uncontrolled emotion, and the platform beneath them groaned under the stress. "I am saving everyone," he roared, his voice echoing through the void. "I am preventing every Chi-Chi and Goten from dying because their protector was too weak or too slow or too concerned with playing fair." The outburst lasted only a few seconds. Then the control returned, the power settled, and the mask of cold certainty slid back into place. "But you're right about one thing," he said quietly. "There's nothing left worth saving. The Goku you knew died in that kitchen 6 months ago. What's standing here now is what grew from his corpse." He waved his hand, and suddenly they were back in the apartment overlooking West City. Gohan was alone. A door opened, and 2 of the governors entered. Up close, they were even more horrifying than they'd appeared on screen. The one on the left might have once been Zarbon, judging by the remnants of green skin beneath the cancerous growths. The other was unrecognizable, its original species lost under layers of twisted flesh and exposed machinery. "Take him to processing," Goku's voice said from everywhere and nowhere. "Priority 7, I want him functional but compliant." The governors reached for Gohan with arms that ended in surgical instruments instead of hands. "Wait," Gohan said, and something in his tone made them pause. "Yes," Goku's voice again. "Before you turn me into another puppet," Gohan said, his power beginning to rise one more time, "let me show you what the old way can really do." His aura exploded outward, but this time it wasn't golden white. This time it was pure white, shot through with veins of silver that seemed to pulse with their own life. "Impossible," one of the governors whispered, but it wasn't impossible. Standing there in that apartment, surrounded by the evidence of his father's twisted love, Gohan had finally understood something that had eluded him his entire life. Power wasn't about being the strongest. It wasn't about control or fear or even protection. Power was about giving people the chance to be better than they were. The new transformation, something beyond mystic God, something that existed at the intersection of divine potential and pure human will, let him do what he'd never been able to do before. He touched the governors with his silver-white energy, and for just a moment, they remembered what they'd been before Goku found them. The horror of what they'd become was almost too much to bear, but underneath it was something else. Hope. The apartment exploded outward as Gohan's power reached its peak. He didn't attack the governors. Instead, he wrapped them in his energy and simply left. Instant transmission carried all 3 of them away from the floating platform and back to Earth's surface. They materialized in the ruins of the warehouse where the resistance had made their last stand. The energy barriers that had held his friends were gone, but so were his friends. "Where is everyone?" he asked the governors, who were still staring at him in amazement. "Processing centers," the one who might have been Zarbon replied, his voice no longer the grinding metal it had been before. "Your father, he's moving faster than anticipated. Everyone who opposed him is being converted. Can it be reversed? We don't know. We've never seen anyone resist it completely. But..." The other governor looked at his hands, which were slowly returning to something resembling their original form. "What you just did to us, if you can do that on a larger scale," Gohan nodded, understanding. His new transformation wasn't just about personal power, it was about restoration. About giving people back the pieces of themselves they'd lost to fear and despair and corruption. "Where are the processing centers?" he asked. "Everywhere," Zarbon replied. "But the primary facility is where the old Capsule Corp used to be. That's where your father is keeping the most important prisoners." Including Pan and Videl, Gohan realized. Including everyone who might be able to help him reach the man his father used to be. "Then that's where we're going," he said, his silver-white aura beginning to stabilize. "But first, we're going to free as many people as we can." The 2 former governors looked at each other, then nodded. For the first time in months, they had a purpose beyond serving Goku's twisted vision of order. "What do we do?" Zarbon asked. Gohan looked out over the infected cityscape, his new power letting him sense the millions of minds trapped under his father's control. "We remind them who they used to be," he said simply, "and then we give them the choice to become who they're meant to be." It wasn't going to be easy, it might not even be possible. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Gohan felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. And sometimes, hope was the most powerful force in the universe, even when facing a god who had forgotten what love really meant. The processing center that had once been Capsule Corp was a monument to efficiency. Where Bulma's laboratories used to hum with the chaotic energy of invention, now endless rows of organic pods pulsed in perfect synchronization. Each one contained a human being in various stages of conversion, their minds being systematically stripped of individuality, free will, and the capacity for independent thought. Gohan crouched on a nearby rooftop, his silver-white aura carefully suppressed as he surveyed the facility. The two reformed governors, who had chosen the names Marcus and Kellen to replace the monstrous identities Goku had forced on them, flanked him on either side. "Third level," Marcus whispered, pointing to a section of the building that glowed with particularly intense dark energy. "That's where they keep the priority prisoners. Family members, close friends, anyone whose conversion needs to be." "Perfect," Kellen added, his voice tight with remembered horror. "Your father takes a personal interest in those cases." Gohan's jaw clenched. Somewhere in that twisted structure, Pan and Videl were being held, along with Bulma, Yamcha, Krillin, and everyone else who dared to oppose the new order. "How many guards?" he asked. 12 governors on the perimeter, maybe 30 conversion specialists inside." Marcus studied the building's defenses. "But Gohan, the real problem isn't the guards, it's the facility itself." "What do you mean?" Kellen gestured toward the pulsing walls. "The entire structure is alive. It's connected to every person inside, monitoring their vital signs, their brain activity, their emotional responses. The moment you set foot in there, your father will know." "Then we don't sneak in," Gohan said, his power beginning to rise. "We go in loud." Before either of them could object, he launched himself toward the facility like a silver comet. His aura blazed as he hit the outer wall at full speed, his new transformation letting him punch through the organic barrier like it was tissue paper. Alarms immediately began screaming throughout the complex. Emergency lights bathed everything in hellish red, and the governor stationed outside began converging on his position. But Gohan wasn't interested in fighting the guards. Instead, he pressed his hands against the facility's living walls and let his restoration power flow through the entire structure. The effect was immediate and devastating. Hundreds of people in various stages of conversion suddenly remembered who they were, what they'd lost, and what had been done to them. The building itself convulsed as its organic components began reverting to their original forms, metal and concrete and glass instead of flesh and bone. Screams echoed through the corridors, but these weren't screams of pain. They were screams of awakening. "What the hell?" one of the governors started to say, just before Marcus tackled him through a window. Chaos erupted throughout the facility as newly freed prisoners began fighting back against their captors. Gohan followed the signatures of familiar ki, cutting through walls and floors with focused energy blasts as he made his way toward the third level. He found Vegeta first. The Saiyan Prince hung suspended in a pod filled with dark fluid, his body covered in neural interfaces that pulsed with malevolent energy. But his eyes were still defiant, still burning with that endless pride that had never been fully broken. Gohan shattered the pod with a single punch, catching Vegeta as he fell forward. "About time, boy," Vegeta gasped, dark fluid streaming from his mouth. "I was starting to think you'd gotten soft. Can you fight?" Vegeta's answer was to power up to Super Saiyan Blue, his aura crackling with electric fury. "I've been waiting months for a chance to pay Kakarot back for this humiliation." They found the others on the same level, Piccolo suspended in a pod that had been slowly draining his regenerative abilities, Krillin trapped in a device designed to suppress his ki permanently, Yamcha connected to machines that were studying his fighting techniques for replication. One by one, Gohan freed them, his restoration power undoing months of careful conversion work in seconds. "Pan," he said as soon as Piccolo was conscious. "Where is she?" The Namekian's face was grim, floor above us. "But Gohan, she's not in a conversion pod." "What do you mean?" "Your father is keeping her conscious, using her as bait." Before Gohan could respond to that chilling statement, the entire facility shuddered. Not from their battle, but from something much larger approaching. "He's coming," Kellen said over their communicators. "Goku just left his orbital platform, ETA 30 seconds. Everyone out," Gohan ordered. "Get as many prisoners as you can and evacuate the area." "What about Pan?" Vegeta demanded. "I'll get her." "Not alone, you won't," Piccolo said, his cape already billowing as he prepared to follow. "Yes, alone," Gohan's silver-white aura flared with determination. "This is between him and me now." He found Pan on the top floor in what had once been Bulma's personal laboratory. She was sitting in a chair that looked almost normal except for the energy restraints holding her in place. At 4 years old, she looked impossibly small in the oversized furniture. But her eyes held a terrible understanding that no child should ever possess. "Grandpa's coming," she said quietly as Gohan approached. "He knows you're here. I'm getting you out of here, Pan." "No, you're not," the voice came from behind him. Gohan spun around to find Goku standing in the doorway, his expression calm but his aura radiating barely contained fury. "Hello, son," I have to admit, I'm impressed. That new transformation of yours is quite remarkable. Reverting my conversion process, restoring free will, it's almost poetic. Let her go, Dad, this is between us. Is it? Goku stepped into the room and immediately the temperature dropped. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been systematically undoing months of careful work, releasing dangerous criminals, restoring chaos to a perfectly ordered system. Those weren't criminals. Those were our friends. Our friends, Goku repeated, his voice taking on that dangerous edge. The same friends who stood by while innocent people suffered, the same friends who prioritized their moral superiority over actually protecting anyone. Gohan's power began to rise, but Goku held up a single finger. He said mildly. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Only then did Gohan notice the collar around Pan's neck. It looked like jewelry, but he could sense the energy contained within it, enough to vaporize a city block. A simple neural interface, Goku explained conversationally. Connected directly to her brainstem, the moment I detect any hostile intent from you, any attempt to attack me or free her, he snapped his fingers. Well, let's just say it would be very messy. You're threatening your own granddaughter. I'm protecting her from making the same mistakes her father is making. Goku walked over to Pan's chair and gently stroked her hair. Aren't I, sweetheart? Pan looked up at him with those two knowing eyes. You're scared, Grandpa. For just a moment, Goku's composure cracked. What did you say? You're scared, Pan repeated, her child's voice carrying more wisdom than it should have been able to hold. Scared like I get when there's thunder. That's why you're being mean to everyone. I'm not being mean, Goku said, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. I'm keeping everyone safe. From what? The question hung in the air like a sword. Goku stared down at his granddaughter, and for a moment Gohan could see the man his father used to be struggling to break through the layers of corruption and fear. From losing the people they love, Goku finally whispered. But Grandpa, Pan said with devastating simplicity, you already lost them. You lost them when you stopped being who they loved. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, Gohan could hear the sounds of battle as the freed prisoners fought against the remaining governors. But inside the laboratory, 3 generations of the Sun family faced the truth that none of them wanted to acknowledge. Goku had won. He'd achieved perfect order, eliminated every threat, created a universe where no one he cared about could ever be hurt again. And in doing so, he destroyed everything that made them worth protecting in the first place. You don't understand, Goku said, but his voice sounded hollow now. You're too young to understand what loss really means. I understand that Daddy cries at night when he thinks I'm sleeping, Pan replied. I understand that Mommy stopped singing because she's too sad. I understand that everyone is afraid of you now, even the people who love you. Gohan watched his father's face as Pan spoke, saw the cracks spreading in that mask of cold certainty. For the first time in months, he felt something approaching hope. Dad, he said quietly, it's not too late. You can still, the building exploded. Not from any attack, but from the sheer force of Goku's emotional response. His aura erupted outward in a wave of silver-purple destruction that turned the top 3 floors of the facility into dust. When the energy cleared, they were floating in midair above the ruins. Goku held Pan's chair with one hand, his expression once again locked in that terrifying calm. You're right, he said to his granddaughter. I have lost the people I love, but I still have you, and Gohan, and Videl. And I will not lose you too, even if it means becoming a monster, Gohan asked. Especially then. Goku looked out over West City, his gaze taking in the organic structures that had infected every street corner. Do you want to know what I see when I look at this world, son? I see paradise. No crime, no war, no suffering. Everyone has a purpose, everyone is safe, everyone is protected from the chaos that destroys lives. Everyone is dead inside, Gohan countered. That's not paradise, it's purgatory. Better purgatory than hell. Goku's aura began to manifest again, but this time it felt different, larger, more fundamental, as if he was tapping into forces beyond simple key manipulation. I gave you a chance to join me willingly. I gave you a chance to help build something better. You chose chaos over order, suffering over safety. The sky above them began to darken as clouds gathered from nowhere. But these weren't normal storm clouds. They were made of pure energy, crackling with the power of creation and destruction. So now you get to watch what your choice leads to, Goku continued, his voice echoing across the entire city. You get to see what happens when order breaks down, when chaos returns, when people are free to make the wrong decisions. He raised his free hand toward the sky, and suddenly Gohan could feel it, every living thing on Earth, connected to his father's power through the organic structures he'd built. 7 billion souls all hanging by a thread that only Goku controlled. Choose, Gohan, his father said simply. Submit to my will, accept the new order, and they all live in perfect peace. Continue your rebellion and watch them all burn. You're bluffing, Gohan said, but his voice lacked conviction. You wouldn't kill innocent people just to prove a point. Goku's smile was sharp as winter. Innocent. There are no innocent people, son. There are only people who haven't had the opportunity to cause harm yet. To prove his point, he gestured toward the ruins of the facility below them. Several of the newly freed prisoners were fighting among themselves, their restored free will immediately leading to conflict and violence. See, this is what freedom gives you. This is what choice creates. Chaos, suffering, death. And this is what control creates, Gohan replied, his own power beginning to rise in response to the threat. Fear, slavery, the death of everything that makes us human. Then we're at an impasse, Goku said calmly. You won't submit and I won't allow chaos to return, which means... The energy clouds above them began to descend, and Gohan realized with horror what his father intended to do. He was going to reset everything. Not just convert the remaining free minds, he was going to kill every person on Earth and rebuild the population from scratch, using people who had never known freedom in the first place. Dad, please. I'm sorry, son. I truly am, but some lessons can only be learned through absolute loss. Goku began to lower his hand, and 7 billion lives hung in the balance. That's when Vegeta attacked. The Saiyan Prince came out of nowhere, his aura blazing with something beyond Super Saiyan Blue. His pride, his rage, his refusal to bow to anyone, even Goku, had pushed him into a new transformation that burned like a star going nova. Royal Blue Evolution, he snarled, his fist connecting with Goku's jaw with enough force to send him flying backward. The chair holding Pan went spinning through the air, but Gohan was already moving. His silver-white transformation let him match his father's speed for just long enough to catch his daughter before she could fall. Get her out of here, Vegeta shouted, already pursuing Goku through the sky above West City. I'll hold him off, you can't win, Gohan called back. I don't need to win. Vegeta's response was accompanied by a barrage of ki blasts that lit up the evening sky. I just need to buy you time to find another way. Gohan looked down at Pan, whose eyes were wide with fear but still held that unbreakable trust that only children possessed. Daddy, she whispered, is Grandpa really going to hurt everyone? Gohan didn't have an answer for that. But as he watched Vegeta trading blows with his father high above the infected city, as he felt the weight of 7 billion lives hanging in the balance, he realized that hope alone wasn't going to be enough. They needed a miracle. And miracles, in his experience, usually came with a price that no one wanted to pay. The war for Earth's soul had begun in earnest, and somewhere in the back of his mind, Gohan began to understand that saving his father might require destroying him first. The battle raging above West City was unlike anything Earth had ever witnessed. Vegeta, burning with royal blue evolution, moved like living lightning across the sky. Each punch he threw carried the weight of his shattered pride, his fury at being controlled, his absolute refusal to kneel before anyone, even the man who had once been his greatest rival. But for all his newfound power, for all his royal rage, he was losing. Goku didn't even seem to be trying. He moved with that horrible dark ultra instinct grace, his body flowing around Vegeta's attacks like water around stones. When he did strike back, it was with surgical precision, not enough to kill, but enough to remind the Saiyan Prince exactly how outclassed he was. Still holding back, Kakarot, Vegeta snarled, wiping blood from his mouth as they circled each other a mile above the city. Still pretending you're the hero in this story. I'm not pretending anything, Goku replied calmly, dodging a ki blast that would have vaporized a mountain. I'm simply giving you time to accept the inevitable. The only thing I accept is that you've become everything I used to hate about myself. Vegeta's aura exploded outward, his power somehow finding new heights even as his body screamed in protest. The difference is I learned to be better. For just a moment, something flickered in Goku's eyes. Pain, maybe, recognition. Then it was gone, buried under layers of cold certainty. Better, he laughed, but there was no humor in it. Vegeta, you spent most of your life as a genocidal prince. I spent mine protecting innocent people. If anyone should understand the necessity of order, it's you. Order, Vegeta's voice cracked with bitter laughter. This isn't order, you fool. This is what I was before I met you. A tyrant so afraid of losing control that he'd rather rule over corpses than live among equals. The words hit harder than any physical attack could have. Goku's composure wavered, his aura stuttering like a candle in the wind. I'm nothing like you were, he said quietly. Aren't you? Vegeta pressed his advantage, both physical and psychological. Tell me, Kakarot, when you look at those people down there, what do you see? Partners, friends, family. I see people who need protection. You see subjects, Vegeta roared, his power spiking as he landed a solid hit on Goku's ribs. You see things to be managed and controlled. You've become exactly what we used to fight against. Below them, Gohan watched the battle with growing desperation. Pan was safe in his arms, but for how long? Even if Vegeta somehow managed to hold his father off, what then? They couldn't keep running forever. And the collar around Pan's neck was still active, still connected to whatever twisted technology Goku had used to threaten her life. Daddy, Pan whispered, her small hand pressed against his chest. The angry man in the sky, he's not really angry at Grandpa. What do you mean, sweetheart? He's angry at himself. For believing Grandpa could be good again. The insight hit Gohan like a physical blow. Pan was right, Vegeta wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to prove to himself that some lines couldn't be crossed, some falls couldn't be forgiven. He was fighting to prove that Goku was still worth saving. We need help, Gohan said to Marcus and Kellen, who had somehow managed to evacuate most of the facility's prisoners during the chaos. More help than we can provide on our own. What do you have in mind? Marcus asked, his reformed features showing concern. Something desperate. Gohan looked up at the battle, at his father casually batting aside attacks that should have been able to level continents. Something that's probably going to get us all killed. Before he could explain further, a familiar energy signature appeared behind them. Gohan spun around to find Trunks materializing out of thin air, his time machine hovering nearby. But this wasn't the Trunks he knew. This version looked older, more worn, with scars that spoke of battles beyond imagining, and his eyes held the weight of someone who had seen civilizations fall. Gohan, he said without preamble, we need to talk. Future Trunks, how did you, the timeline's fracturing, Trunks interrupted, his voice tight with urgency. What your father's doing here, it's sending shockwaves through the multiverse. In my timeline, we're dealing with 3 different versions of this same crisis. 3 versions, evil Goku variants, each one worse than the last. One conquered his universe through pure force. One used mind control to turn everyone into willing slaves. And the third, Trunks shuddered. The third found a way to merge with the concept of order itself. He's not even human anymore. Gohan felt ice forming in his stomach. Are you saying this is going to get worse? I'm saying it already has in other timelines, but that's why I'm here. Trunks gestured toward his time machine. I've brought help, allies from timelines where we found ways to fight back. The machine's hatch opened, and Gohan's breath caught. The first figure to emerge was instantly recognizable, another version of himself, but one that radiated power beyond anything he'd achieved. This Gohan's mystic transformation had evolved into something transcendent, his entire being crackling with silver-white energy. Behind him came others. A Piccolo whose fusion with every Namekian in his timeline had made him godlike. An android 18 whose infinite energy had been weaponized beyond all recognition. Even a Frieza whose golden form had been pushed to limits that defied comprehension. Alternative timeline allies, the other Gohan explained, his voice carrying authority that made even Vegeta's battle pause for a moment. Each of us has dealt with our own version of this crisis. None of us succeeded alone. Then how? By accepting that some victories require sacrifices, the alternate Piccolo said, his voice echoing with the combined wisdom of a billion Namekians. By understanding that sometimes, to save someone you love, you first have to let them fall far enough to remember who they used to be. Above them, Vegeta's scream of pain drew their attention back to the battle. Goku had finally stopped holding back, his dark Ultra Instinct form radiating power that made reality itself seem unstable. The Saiyan Prince was falling, his royal blue evolution finally overwhelmed by forces beyond his ability to comprehend. We're out of time, the alternate Gohan said. Whatever we're going to do, it has to be now. The Dragon Balls, Gohan said suddenly. We use the Dragon Balls to, won't work, alternate Frieza interrupted, his golden form pulsing with dark energy. Your father's power exceeds Shenron's ability to grant wishes against him. We tried that in my timeline. Then what do you suggest? Something that will either save everyone or doom the multiverse, alternate Piccolo replied grimly. We're going to attempt a temporal reversal. You mean go back in time and prevent this from happening? More complex than that, Trunks explained, pulling out a device that hurt to look at directly. We're going to create a temporal loop, trap your father in a repeating cycle of the moment his family died, forcing him to relive it until he either breaks completely or finds another path. The implications of that plan settled over them like a shroud. They weren't talking about fighting Goku, they were talking about trapping him in his worst moment for eternity. "That's torture," Gohan said quietly. "Yes," alternate Gohan replied without flinching. "It is. The question is, are you willing to torture your father to save 7 billion innocent people?" Before Gohan could answer, Vegeta crashed to the ground beside them, his body broken and his pride finally, truly shattered. Blood streamed from countless wounds as he struggled to stay conscious. "Tried to reach him," he gasped. "Tried to remind him who he used to be, but there's nothing left, Gohan." "Nothing human? There has to be," Gohan insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Look up," Vegeta whispered. "Look at what he's become and tell me that's still your father." Gohan did look up, and what he saw filled him with despair. Goku floated above them like a dark angel, his aura no longer silver-purple but pure black shot through with veins of hungry light. His transformation had evolved again, pushed beyond Dark Ultra instinct into something that existed at the intersection of divine power and absolute corruption. "Corrupted Omni," alternate Frieza breathed, his golden form actually taking a step backward. "He's achieved the same form that destroyed my timeline." "How long do we have?" Trunks asked. "Minutes, maybe less. Once he stabilizes in that form, he'll be able to rewrite reality on a universal scale." As if to prove his point, Goku raised one hand toward the sky. The energy clouds that had been gathering began to descend again, but this time they weren't just threatening Earth. They were reaching toward other planets, other solar systems, other galaxies. "He's not just planning to reset Earth anymore," alternate Gohan realized with horror. "He's going to reset everything. The entire universe, rebuilt according to his vision of perfect order." "Then we have no choice," Gohan said, his heart breaking with every word. "Do it, activate the temporal loop." Trunks began working frantically with his device while the others formed a protective circle around him. But they all knew it was a desperate gambit. Even if they succeeded, the cost would be almost unthinkable. "There's something else you should know," alternate Piccolo said quietly. "In every timeline where we've attempted this, it doesn't just trap one version of the target. The temporal stress creates fractures, splitting the loop across multiple realities. Meaning we might not just be trapping your father in his worst moment. We might be creating multiple versions of him, each one following a different path from that same starting point." The weight of that revelation settled over them. They weren't just risking failure, they were risking making the problem exponentially worse. "Device is ready," Trunks announced, sweat beading on his forehead from the strain of manipulating forces that shouldn't exist. "But we need someone to anchor the loop from the inside. Someone who can survive being at the center of a temporal paradox." Everyone looked at Gohan, and he knew what they were asking. "You want me to go back with him," he said quietly. "To be there when it happens, to try and guide him toward a different choice." "It's the only way," alternate Gohan confirmed. "And Gohan, there's no guarantee you'll come back. The temporal stress might tear you apart or trap you in the loop forever." Gohan looked down at Pan, still safe in his arms, still trusting him to protect her from the monster their grandfather had become. "If I don't come back," he said to the assembled heroes, "promise me you'll find another way. Promise me you won't give up on saving what's left of the universe." "We promise," Trunks said simply. Above them, Goku's transformation reached its peak. His corrupted Omni form was fully stabilized now, radiating power that existed beyond normal physics. Reality bent around him like light around a black hole. "Time's up," he said, his voice echoing across dimensions. "I'm sorry it came to this. I'm sorry you all chose chaos over order, but some lessons can only be learned through complete destruction." He began to close his raised hand, and suddenly everyone on Earth could feel it, the weight of universal annihilation pressing down on them like a physical force. "Do it!" Gohan shouted. Trunks activated the device. The universe screamed. For a moment that lasted forever and an instant that contained eternity, every timeline that had ever existed or ever could exist converged on a single point in space and time. Past, present, and future became meaningless concepts as reality folded in on itself. When the chaos cleared, Gohan found himself standing in a familiar kitchen, watching a scene he'd hoped never to witness again. Chi-Chi was cooking dinner, humming under her breath. Goten sat at the table, working on homework and complaining about mathematics. Outside, birds sang in the garden that would never be tended again. And beside him, wearing an expression of growing horror, stood his father as he used to be, pure, innocent, untainted by the corruption that would soon consume him. "What is this?" Goku whispered, staring at the peaceful scene. This is the day they died. Yes, Gohan said quietly, and you're going to watch it happen again, and again, and again, until you find another path. Goku turned to stare at his son, and for the first time in months, his eyes held something approaching their old warmth. Gohan, but how are you? What did you do? What we had to do, Gohan replied sadly. What you forced us to do. The temperature in the kitchen began to drop as frost formed on the windows. Malachar's arrival was imminent. I can save them this time, Goku said desperately, power already beginning to flare around him. I know what's coming now. I can be here when they need me. Can you? Gohan asked. Or will you make the same choice you made before? Will you let that creature's corruption into your heart again? Goku's only answer was to disappear, using instant transmission to appear at his wife's side just as the kitchen filled with that terrible, hungry cold. But Gohan remained where he was, watching the scene unfold with the weight of infinite repetition pressing down on his soul, because he knew something his father didn't. This wasn't just a loop. This was a test. And somewhere in the space between heartbeats, between one choice and another, between salvation and damnation, the fate of every universe that had ever existed hung in the balance. The gambit had worked. Now they could only pray that the price they'd paid wouldn't destroy everything they'd hoped to save. Reality had cancer. That was the only way Whis could describe what he was sensing as he stood in the null space between dimensions, watching the fundamental structure of existence convulse around a single point in time. The temporal loop that Gohan and his allies had created wasn't just trapping one version of Goku. It was fracturing the multiverse into infinite iterations of the same terrible moment. Lord Beerus, he said quietly, his usual serene demeanor replaced by genuine concern. I believe you need to see this. The god of destruction materialized beside his attendant, his perpetually drowsy expression sharpening as he felt the disturbance. What in Zano's name did those mortals do? They attempted to create a temporal paradox to rehabilitate Goku, Whis replied, gesturing toward the swirling chaos before them. Unfortunately, the strain of trapping someone of his power level in a causal loop has caused complications. The complications were visible as tears in space-time itself, each one showing a different version of the same kitchen, the same family, the same moment of loss playing out in subtly different ways. In one fracture, Goku arrived in time to save Chi-Chi and Goten, only to watch them die slowly from Malachar's poison instead of quickly from his violence. In another, he killed Malachar before the creature could speak, preventing the corruption but also losing the chance to absorb the stolen key that would let him track down the rest of the feeding network. In a third, he chose mercy, trying to redeem Malachar, and watched his family die while he wasted time on philosophy. Dozens of variations, hundreds, thousands. Each one ending in loss, each one driving a different version of Goku down a slightly different path toward the same destination. They're all becoming monsters, Beerus observed grimly. Every single iteration. Some faster than others, but he trailed off as one particular fracture caught his attention. In that timeline, Goku had arrived early enough to save his family, but the knowledge of what could have happened, what had happened in other realities, was driving him toward the same paranoid authoritarianism. This version wasn't corrupted by stolen ki, but by the weight of infinite possibility and the certainty that every choice led to suffering. The loop isn't rehabilitating him, Whis said quietly. It's multiplying him, creating infinite versions of the same tragedy, each one producing another potential universal threat. How many universes are affected? Whis consulted his staff, its gem flickering with calculations beyond mortal comprehension. All of them, the temporal stress is spreading through the multiverse like a virus. Universe 6, Universe 11, all the way up to an alarm that existed beyond sound suddenly filled their awareness. Both angel and god of destruction went rigid as they felt a presence that dwarfed even their considerable power. The Grand Priest was manifesting. He appeared not as the diminutive figure the mortals had met during the Tournament of Power, but in his true form, a being of such concentrated authority that his mere presence made the fabric of existence sing in harmonious terror. Whis, Beerus, his voice contained the echo of creation itself. Report. The mortals from Universe 7 have created a temporal paradox, Whis began, but the Grand Priest waved him silent. I am aware of their actions. What I require is an assessment of the damage. Beerus stepped forward, his usual attitude replaced by the deference due to someone who could erase him with a thought. The loop is spreading, Lord Grand Priest. At current rate of expansion, it will encompass the entire multiverse within hours. And the Omniking, still sleeping, but the temporal distortions are beginning to reach even his realm. If this continues, Whis didn't need to finish. If Xana woke up to find reality itself fracturing around him, his response would be characteristically simple and absolute. He would erase everything and start over. Containment is our primary concern, the Grand Priest declared. The temporal loop must be stabilized or eliminated before it reaches critical mass. With respect, Lord Grand Priest, Whis said carefully, elimination may not be possible. The subject is now distributed across infinite timelines, each one anchored by the emotional weight of his trauma. To destroy the loop might require destroying the concept of loss itself. Then we contain it. The Grand Priest gestured, and suddenly a dozen other angels materialized around them. Each one represented a different universe, each one bearing the same expression of controlled panic. Vados, Margarita, Cuss, the Grand Priest addressed them in turn. Your universes are experiencing fracture events. Status reports. Universe 6 has 17 confirmed Goku variants, Vados replied, her usual playful demeanor nowhere to be found. 3 have achieved godlike power levels. 1 has begun converting populated worlds to his vision of order. Universe 11 shows 12 variants, but they're different, Margarita added. These versions seem to retain more of their original personality, but their methods are becoming increasingly extreme. Universe 2 has only 3 variants, but they've begun working together, Cuss reported. They call themselves the Trinity of Order. The combined threat assessment is off our scales. The Grand Priest absorbed these reports with the calm of someone who had managed multiversal crises for eons beyond counting. But even he seemed troubled by the scope of what they were facing. The original loop, he asked. Still active, Whis confirmed. The primary Gohan remains inside, attempting to guide his father toward a different choice. But so far, every iteration has failed. Deep within the temporal storm, in a kitchen that existed in all timelines and none of them, Gohan watched his father make the same mistake for the 3000th time. This iteration had started with promise. Goku had arrived before Malachar could kill his family, had even managed to defeat the creature without being corrupted by its stolen ki. But when the dust settled, when Chi-Chi and Goten were safe in his arms, he'd looked at his son with eyes that held a terrible understanding. This happened in other timelines, didn't it? He'd asked. They died because I wasn't here. Dad, how many other families are dying right now while I'm celebrating this victory? How many other Chi-Chis and Gotens are suffering because their protector was too weak, too slow, too concerned with playing fair? And there it was. Even without the corruption, even without the stolen ki, the knowledge of infinite loss was driving him toward the same authoritarian conclusion. If every choice led to suffering, then choice itself was the enemy. You can't save everyone, Gohan had tried to explain. No one can, that's not weakness, that's just reality. But Goku's response had been the same as always. Then reality needs to change. Now, as the loop reset for the 3001st time, Gohan felt the weight of eternal repetition crushing down on his soul. He was losing pieces of himself with each iteration, his memories blurring together until he could barely remember which timeline was which. There has to be another way, he whispered, watching Malachar's arrival begin again. There has to be something I'm missing. There is. The voice came from beside him, and Gohan turned to see another figure in the kitchen, a woman he didn't recognize, wearing robes that seemed to be cut from the fabric of space itself. Who are you? I'm someone who's been watching this tragedy play out across infinite realities, she replied, her voice carrying the weight of cosmic authority. My name is Kranoa, and I'm what mortals call the Supreme Kai of Time. You can stop this. I can't, she said sadly. But you might be able to, if you're willing to accept what your father really needs to learn. Which is? Kranoa gestured toward the scene playing out before them, Goku fighting desperately to save his family while the weight of infinite possibility pressed down on his shoulders. That some losses can't be prevented, that some pain can't be avoided, and that the attempt to eliminate all suffering from existence is itself the greatest source of suffering ever conceived. I've tried telling him that. Every iteration I try to explain. You're trying to teach him with words, Kranoa interrupted. But this is a lesson that can only be learned through experience. He needs to feel what he's putting the universe through. He needs to understand that his quest to eliminate suffering has created more pain than any villain he's ever faced. The implications of what she was suggesting hit Gohan like a physical blow. You want me to show him what he becomes, to let him experience the full weight of his choices. Not let him experience it, Kranoa corrected. Make him experience it. Force him to confront every life he's destroyed, every mind he's enslaved, every act of love he's perverted in the name of protection. That could shatter his mind completely. Yes, it could. But it's the only path that leads to genuine redemption. Klonoa's expression was infinitely sad. The question is, are you strong enough to inflict that necessary cruelty on someone you love? Before Gohan could answer, the kitchen around them began to fracture. The other angels had arrived, their combined power pressing against the temporal loop like fingers probing a wound. They're trying to contain the damage, Klonoa explained. But containment isn't enough anymore. The fracture is spreading too fast, creating too many variables. Soon, there will be more evil Goku variants than the multiverse can sustain. Through the cracks in reality, Gohan could see glimpses of other timelines. Worlds burning under the rule of different versions of his father. Universes where the Trinity of Order had achieved perfect synchronization. Realities where corrupted omniforms battled each other for the right to remake existence. How long do we have? He asked. Minutes, maybe less. The Grand Priest is considering extreme measures. Which are? Klonoa's silence was answer enough. If they couldn't stop the spread, if they couldn't rehabilitate or contain the threat, then the only remaining option was the one that Zano would choose when he woke up. Total erasure, not just of the threats, but of everything that had been contaminated by their existence. Then we do it, Gohan said, his voice steady despite the horror of what he was contemplating. We force him to confront what he's become, all of it, every version, every choice, every consequence. The psychic trauma alone could kill him, Klonoa warned. Then so be it. Gohan's silver-white aura began to manifest, but this time it carried something new, the weight of absolute necessity. If he dies learning the truth about what love really means, at least he dies as himself instead of living as a monster. Klonoa nodded slowly. I'll anchor the revelation, but Gohan, once we begin this, there's no going back. Either your father breaks completely, finds redemption, or we all die together when Zano erases everything. Gohan looked one last time at the scene before them, his father desperately fighting to save his family, not knowing that his quest to prevent all future loss would damn the entire multiverse. I understand, do it. The Supreme Kai of Time raised her hands, and suddenly every fractured timeline, every divergent possibility, every iteration of Goku's fall from grace began to converge on a single point of consciousness. In that kitchen that existed everywhere and nowhere, Son Goku was about to experience the full weight of what his love had become. And somewhere beyond the temporal storm, the Grand Priest felt the disturbance reaching critical mass and began to compose the message he hoped he wouldn't have to deliver to the Omniking. The message that would end with the simple word that had ended so many realities before. Erase. The war for Goku's soul had reached its final battle, and the fate of every universe that had ever existed now rested on whether a father's love could survive the truth about what it had become. The convergence began like a whisper and ended like a scream. Every version of Son Goku across infinite timelines suddenly found themselves sharing the same consciousness, the same moment, the same terrible understanding of what they had all become. The kitchen that existed in all realities and none became a nexus point where every choice, every atrocity, every act of perverted love crashed together like colliding galaxies. Goku, the original, the one who had started it all, fell to his knees as the weight of infinite damnation poured into his mind. He saw himself conquering Universe 6, turning its peaceful populations into willing slaves who thanked him for stealing their freedom. He watched himself merge with 3 other versions to form the Trinity of Order, their combined power rewriting the laws of physics to eliminate the very concept of individual will. He felt himself become the corrupted Omni who had transcended godhood itself, existing as a fundamental force of control that turned love into chains and protection into imprisonment. Thousands of versions, millions. Each one convinced they were saving the universe, each one creating more suffering than any villain they had ever faced. No, he whispered, his voice cracking under the strain. No, this isn't. I didn't mean, but the revelation wasn't finished. Klonoa's power forced him to experience not just his own actions, but their consequences. Every mind he had enslaved across infinite realities. Every child who would never laugh again, because laughter was too chaotic for his perfect order. Every act of creativity, spontaneity, and joy that had been ground down under the heel of his twisted compassion. Billions upon billions of souls all crying out in perfect unison, "We trusted you, we loved you, and you stole our humanity in the name of protecting us." "Stop," Goku begged, his hands pressed against his head as blood began to trickle from his eyes. "Please, I can't, this isn't what I wanted." "Isn't it?" Gohan knelt beside his father, his own voice heavy with the weight of necessary cruelty. "You wanted to eliminate suffering, Dad. Well, this is what that looks like when taken to its logical conclusion. Through the psychic storm, more images flooded Goku's consciousness. Vegeta, broken and humiliated, dying alone on a dozen different worlds because he refused to kneel. Piccolo, his mind shattered and reformed so many times that he couldn't remember his own name. Krillin, turned into a living weapon whose only purpose was to serve Goku's will. And worst of all, Chi-Chi and Goten, alive in some timelines but hollow, their personalities scrubbed clean and rebuilt according to Goku's specifications. They loved him in these realities, but it was the love of puppets for their puppeteer, empty and programmed and utterly soulless. I saved them, Goku sobbed, his corrupted Omni form beginning to flicker and fade under the assault. In some timelines, I saved them. You created perfect slaves wearing their faces, Gohan replied pitilessly. Tell me, Dad, which is worse, losing someone you love or turning them into something that can never disappoint you? Before Goku could answer, the kitchen around them began to change. The walls faded away, replaced by something that looked almost like the afterlife. Clouds of golden light stretching into infinity, peaceful and warm and impossibly pure. And walking toward them through that divine radiance came two figures that made Goku's heart stop. Chi-Chi and Goten, but not as he remembered them. Not as victims of violence, not as empty puppets singing his praises. These versions carried the weight of cosmic understanding, their forms glowing with the peace that came only from true acceptance. Hello, Goku, Chi-Chi said, her voice exactly as warm and loving as it had always been. We've been waiting for you, Chi-Chi. Goku tried to stand, tried to reach for her, but his body wouldn't obey. The weight of infinite guilt held him pinned to the ground. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I tried to save you, I tried to make sure it never happened again. We know, she said simply, kneeling down beside him. And we understand why you did what you did. Love makes us do terrible things sometimes, especially when we're afraid. But Dad, Goten added, his child's voice carrying wisdom beyond his years, fear isn't love. And control isn't protection. Chi-Chi reached out to touch her husband's face, and her touch carried no reproach, no anger, only the infinite sadness of someone who had watched the person she loved destroy himself in the name of saving her. Do you remember our first kiss? She asked quietly. The question was so unexpected that it cut through the psychic storm like a blade. Goku looked up at her, confusion replacing despair. What? Our first kiss, on our wedding day. Do you remember what you were thinking? Despite everything, despite the weight of multiversal damnation crushing down on him, Goku found himself smiling slightly. I was thinking that I'd never felt anything so perfect. So, free, Chi-Chi repeated. Not controlled, not planned, not forced, just free, two people choosing to love each other with all the risk and uncertainty that entailed. That's what love really is, Dad, Goten said, taking his father's hand. It's not keeping someone safe from everything that could hurt them. It's trusting them to face whatever comes and being there to help when they need you. Goku stared at his family, not the broken victims of his failure, not the perfect puppets of his success, but the real Chi-Chi and Goten, speaking from whatever realm souls went to when their bodies died. But if I hadn't been so weak, he whispered, if I had been stronger, smarter, more careful, then we would have lived longer, Chi-Chi agreed. But we wouldn't have lived better, and eventually something else would have killed us. A disease, an accident, old age, that's what mortality means, my love. It means that every moment is precious because it won't last forever. You tried to make love eternal by making it perfect, Goten added. But perfect love isn't love at all, it's just programming. Through the golden light, Gohan watched his father struggle with concepts that went to the heart of everything he'd believed for the past months. Around them, the temporal storm was beginning to stabilize as the infinite versions of Goku slowly consolidated back into one. But that consolidation was bringing with it every scrap of power, every fragment of corrupted divinity that those versions had accumulated. The single Goku kneeling in that space between realities was becoming something beyond godhood, a being with the power to reshape existence itself. And the question that would determine the fate of every universe was simple. What would he choose to do with that power? I can feel them, Goku said quietly, his aura beginning to manifest again. All the people I've hurt across all those timelines. Billions of souls crying out for justice. What are you going to do? Gohan asked, though part of him was afraid of the answer. Goku stood slowly, his form crackling with energy that existed beyond normal physics. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. I'm going to give it back. Give what back? All of it. Every choice I stole, every freedom I destroyed, every moment of joy I ground down in the name of order. Goku's transformation began to shift, the dark corruption that had defined him for so long giving way to something else, something that burned with pure, selfless intention. Dad, no, Gohan realized what his father was planning. The psychic feedback alone will kill you. To restore free will to billions of people across infinite timelines will require me to sacrifice the power I used to take it away in the first place, Goku finished. I know, but it's the only way to undo what I've done, the only way to honor what love really means. Chi-Chi stepped forward, her spirit form beginning to fade as the temporal storm reached its resolution. We're proud of you, she said simply, both of you, for finding your way back to what matters. Will I see you again? Goku asked desperately. Someday, she promised. When your time comes naturally, when you've lived the life we always wanted you to have. A life full of choices, good and bad, that make you who you're meant to be. The spirits of his wife and son faded into the golden light, leaving Goku alone with his eldest son in a space that was rapidly collapsing back toward normal reality. Are you ready? Krinoa asked, her temporal powers already beginning to unweave the loop that had contained them. Once you begin the restoration, there's no stopping it. You'll be channeling power equivalent to the birth of universes. Goku nodded, his expression peaceful for the first time in months. I'm ready, but Gohan. He looked at his son with eyes that finally held their old warmth. I need you to do something for me. Anything. When this is over, when the multiverse is restored and Goku paused, unable to say the word. Take care of Pan, teach her that strength isn't about control, it's about the choice to protect people even when they make decisions you disagree with. Dad, and tell Vegeta that he was right about everything. The universe needs chaos as much as it needs order. It needs people to make mistakes, to fail, to pick themselves up and try again. That's not weakness, that's what makes life worth protecting. The space around them began to fracture as reality reasserted itself. Through the cracks, Gohan could see the Grand Priest and his assembled angels, watching with expressions of carefully controlled hope. Tell them all, Goku continued, his power reaching levels that made the air itself sing with harmonics beyond hearing, that I'm sorry. That I forgot what it means to love someone enough to let them be themselves. The restoration began. Across infinite timelines, in countless universes, billions of enslaved minds suddenly remembered what freedom felt like. The organic structures that had infected worlds crumbled back into normal matter. The governors who had enforced Goku's will collapsed as the power sustaining them vanished. Perfect order gave way to beautiful, chaotic, gloriously imperfect life. And at the center of it all, Son Goku burned like a star going nova, his life force streaming out across the multiverse to undo every act of perverted love he had ever committed. Goodbye, son, he whispered as his form began to fade. Remember us as we were, not as what fear made us become. Dad, wait, but he was already gone, his sacrifice rippling through reality like the echo of creation itself. The temporal loop collapsed, the fractured timelines healed, and the multiverse settled back into its natural state of controlled chaos. When the light faded, Gohan found himself standing in the ruins of what had once been Capsule Corp, surrounded by friends whose minds had been restored to their original clarity. Pan ran toward him on unsteady legs, her collar gone, her eyes bright with the joy of a child who had never learned to fear her own emotions. Daddy, she cried, throwing herself into his arms. Grandpa came to see me. He looked different, all sparkly and warm, and he said to tell you that he's sorry for being scared. Gohan held his daughter close, feeling the weight of his father's sacrifice settling into his bones. Around them, the others were picking themselves up, checking on each other, marveling at the sudden return of thoughts and feelings they'd forgotten they'd lost. Is it over? Vegeta asked, his voice hoarse from months of suppressed rage finally being released. Yes, Gohan replied, though his heart was breaking. It's over. But even as he said the words, he could feel something else beginning. The multiverse had been scarred by what had happened, and those scars would need time to heal. There would be consequences to Goku's actions that would ripple through reality for generations to come. And somewhere in the space between what was and what could be, Gohan could sense his father's presence, not gone, but changed, transformed into something that existed at the intersection of love and sacrifice and the terrible beauty of letting go. The war for the universe's soul was over, but the work of healing what had been broken was just beginning, and for the first time in months, that felt like hope. The silence after a universe screams is unlike anything else. Gohan stood in the ruins of what had once been his father's throne room, holding Pan close as the last echoes of the restoration faded across dimensions. Around them, reality was still settling back into its proper shape, the organic growths that had infected entire worlds crumbling into dust and memory. But something was wrong. The energy patterns are unstable, Bulma said, her voice hoarse as she worked frantically with a salvaged scanner. Goku's sacrifice closed the temporal loop, but the multiversal scarring. It's not healing properly. Through the cracked viewports, they could see the problem. Where the organic structures had collapsed, they'd left behind tears in spacetime itself, wounds in reality that pulsed with dark energy and showed glimpses of other dimensions bleeding through. How bad is it? Vegeta asked, his own power still fluctuating as his mind struggled to process months of suppressed memories. Bad, Piccolo replied grimly, his enhanced senses picking up distortions that made his skin crawl. The multiverse is infected. Goku undid the control, but the corruption he absorbed from all those timelines had to go somewhere. As if summoned by his words, something began emerging from the largest of the dimensional tiers. Not one creature, but dozens, fragments of the evil that Goku had accumulated across infinite realities, now given form and independence by his sacrifice. They looked like twisted reflections of familiar faces. A Frieza made entirely of crystallized hatred. A Cell whose bioabsorption had turned him into a living void. A Majin Buu whose childlike innocence had been replaced by ancient, calculating malice. But worst of all were the ones that looked like Goku himself. Shadow variants, Trunks breathed, his time machine's sensors going haywire as they detected the approaching threat. The corruption he absorbed didn't just disappear, it became autonomous. The lead shadow, wearing Goku's face but with eyes like black holes, landed on the platform with impossible grace. When it spoke, its voice carried the echo of every atrocity committed across the fractured timelines. "Hello, son," it said to Gohan, its smile sharp as broken glass. "Did you really think sacrifice could erase what we became? Did you think love could undo the fundamental truth we discovered? You're not my father," Gohan said firmly, his silver-white aura beginning to manifest. "Aren't we?" Another shadow landed beside the first, this one radiating the cold certainty of the Trinity of Order. "We are everything he suppressed, everything he tried to sacrifice. We are the truth he couldn't face, that some problems can only be solved through absolute control." More shadows were emerging now, each one representing a different aspect of Goku's fall from grace. The grief that had started it all, the fear that had driven his choices, the corrupted love that had justified every atrocity. The real Goku chose to let go, Gohan said, his power rising to meet the threat. He chose to trust in people's ability to make their own choices. And look where that trust led, the grief shadow hissed, its form crackling with dark energy. Chi-Chi and Goten are still dead. The villains we showed mercy to still caused untold suffering. Nothing has really changed. Around the platform, the other Z-fighters were taking defensive positions, but they all knew the truth. They were exhausted, drained from months of mental conditioning, and these shadows carried all of Goku's power without any of his remaining restraint. "We could have been gods," the Fear Shadow whispered, its presence making the air itself recoil. "We could have eliminated every threat, prevented every tragedy. Instead, he chose weakness. Chose to let the universe remain broken. He chose humanity," Vegeta snarled, powering up to royal blue evolution despite his depleted reserves. "Something you parasites could never understand." The battle erupted without warning. The shadows moved with all of Goku's speed but none of his tactical restraint. They fought to kill, to prove their twisted philosophy through violence. Within seconds, half the platform was reduced to rubble, and the dimensional tiers around them began widening as the energy discharge fed the instability. Gohan found himself facing three shadows at once: grief, fear, and corrupted love, all working in perfect coordination to overwhelm his defenses. His silver-white transformation was powerful, but it had been designed for restoration, not destruction. "You cannot win," the Love Shadow taunted, its attacks carrying the weight of genuine affection twisted into something possessive and controlling. "We are what he truly was beneath all the pretense. We are honesty." But even as the words left its mouth, something else emerged from the dimensional tiers. Not more shadows, but figures of light, spirits of the redeemed, led by a familiar presence that made Gohan's heart soar with desperate hope. Goku stepped through the barrier between life and death, his form translucent but radiating the pure warmth that had defined him before the corruption took hold. Behind him came others, versions of himself from timelines where he'd made different choices, where love had remained untainted by fear. "You're wrong," he said simply, addressing his shadow selves with infinite compassion. "I'm not dead, I'm free." The shadows recoiled from his presence like vampires from sunlight. This Goku carried none of the power they remembered, none of the divine authority that had once made him unstoppable. But he radiated something they'd forgotten existed, the the strength that came from accepting loss, from trusting others, from choosing hope even in the face of inevitable pain. Impossible, the grief shadow snarled. We felt you die, we felt your power scatter across the multiverse. You felt me let go, Goku corrected. There's a difference. He looked around the battlefield, taking in the scene of his friends and family fighting desperately against the darkest parts of himself. Then he smiled, not the cold expression the shadows wore, but the genuine warmth that had once inspired an entire universe to believe in redemption. Gohan, he called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. Remember what I taught you about the Kamehameha. Despite everything, despite the desperate battle raging around them, Gohan found himself smiling. Focus on what you want to protect, not what you want to destroy. Exactly. Goku's spirit form began to glow brighter, and suddenly every version of himself from across the multiverse was there with him, not the corrupted variants, but the ones who had chosen differently, who had found other paths through their pain. This is our final lesson, the spirit said, addressing both his son and his shadow selves. Power isn't about control, it's not about preventing loss or eliminating suffering. Real power is about giving people the chance to become better than they are. The shadows attacked en masse, pouring everything they had into one final assault designed to prove their philosophy through overwhelming force. But instead of fighting back, Goku and his redeemed variants simply embraced them, not physically but spiritually. They wrapped the shadows in the kind of love that asked for nothing in return, that accepted even the darkest aspects of themselves without trying to change or control them. You're part of me, Goku said as the grief shadow struggled against his luminous embrace. You always have been. The pain of losing Chi-Chi and Goten, the fear of failing again, the desperate need to protect everyone, these aren't things to be destroyed. They're things to be understood. But they led to such suffering, the grief shadow whispered, its form beginning to soften around the edges. They led to suffering when I tried to eliminate them, Goku agreed. When I tried to love without risk, protect without trust, save people from themselves. But grief can also lead to compassion. Fear can lead to wisdom. Love can lead to letting go. One by one, the shadows stopped fighting. Not because they were overpowered, but because they were finally being accepted for what they truly were, not enemies to be defeated, but parts of the self that needed integration, not elimination. I'm scared, the fear shadow admitted, its cosmic power fading as it allowed itself to be vulnerable. Scared of losing everyone I care about. I know, Goku replied gently. But being scared doesn't mean you get to cage the people you love. It means you learn to be brave enough to let them be free. As the last of the shadows dissolved back into the light they'd been cut from, the dimensional tears began to heal. Reality settled back into its proper configuration, no longer torn between order and chaos, but finding the balance between them. Gohan watched his father's spirit begin to fade again, but this time there was no desperation, no attempt to hold on to what was ending. Will I see you again? He asked, echoing the question Goku had once posed to Chi-Chi. When your time comes, Goku promised, but not before you've lived a full life. Not before you've made mistakes and learned from them, not before you've experienced all the joy and pain that makes existence worthwhile. He looked around one last time, taking in the faces of everyone who had fought to save him from himself. Thank you, he said simply, all of you, for reminding me what love really means. As the spirit faded, the last of the dimensional instability healed itself. The multiverse was scarred but whole, forever changed by what had happened but no longer in danger of collapse. Pan tugged on Gohan's gi, looking up at him with eyes that held more understanding than any 4-year-old should possess. Grandpa's really gone now, isn't he? She asked. Gohan knelt down to her level, gathering her into his arms. His body is gone, sweetheart, but everything that made him special, his love for us, his strength, his choice to always try to do better, that's still here. In us. Around them, the other fighters were beginning the long process of rebuilding. Not just the physical structures that had been destroyed, but the trust, the relationships, the faith in each other that had been damaged by months of corruption and control. It would take time. Years, maybe decades. But for the first time since this nightmare began, they had something more powerful than hope. They had each other, freely chosen and freely given. And in a universe where love existed without chains, where protection didn't require control, where loss was accepted as the price of genuine connection, that was enough. The heart of darkness had finally been illuminated. Not destroyed, not eliminated, but transformed into something that could coexist with the light. And in that balance, the multiverse began to heal. 5 years later, Earth looked almost normal again. The organic structures that had once infected every major city were gone, replaced by buildings designed with both beauty and function in mind. The streets bustled with the comfortable chaos of free people making their own choices, some good, some bad, all authentically human. But if you knew where to look, you could still see the scars. Gohan stood on the balcony of his new home, watching Pan practice her flying in the garden below. At 9 years old, she moved through the air with a grace that reminded him painfully of his father, but her laughter was pure joy, uncontrolled, spontaneous, and absolutely free. "Daddy, look," she called out, executing a perfect barrel roll that would have made any pilot proud. "Uncle Piccolo taught me this one." "Very impressive," Gohan called back, though his heart clenched at how easily she moved through techniques that had once been used to enforce his father's twisted vision of order. The world had healed, but the healing hadn't been without cost. In the immediate aftermath of Goku's sacrifice, they discovered just how deep the corruption had spread. Entire governments had been replaced with Goku's appointees. Military forces across the globe had been restructured around his vision of necessary control. Most disturbing of all, millions of people had become so accustomed to having their choices made for them that freedom felt like abandonment. The suicide rates in the first year after liberation had been staggering. "You're brooding again," Videl said, joining him on the balcony with 2 cups of coffee. "I can see it in your shoulders." Gohan accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma. Simple pleasures like this had taken on new meaning after months of perfectly optimized nutrition delivered through feeding tubes. "Just thinking about the memorial service tomorrow," he said. 5 years and I still don't know what to say." Tomorrow marked the 5th anniversary of what historians were already calling the Restoration. There would be speeches about freedom and sacrifice, about the price of peace and the cost of control. World leaders would make pronouncements about never forgetting the lessons learned. But Gohan knew the truth. People were already forgetting. The younger generation, those who had grown up after the Restoration, thought of evil Goku as ancient history. A cautionary tale from their parents' time, no more real than any other monster from the old stories. "You could talk about him," Videl suggested gently. "The real him, not the monster he became, but who he was before." "I've tried. But every time I start talking about his kindness, his pure heart, someone in the audience gets that look, like they're wondering if I'm making excuses for what he did." "Are you?" The question hit harder than any physical blow could have. Gohan set down his coffee cup, his hands shaking slightly. "I don't know," he admitted. "Sometimes I think about all the people who died because of his actions, and I wonder if he deserved redemption at all. Other times I remember him teaching me to fly, or the way his face lit up when Pan was born, and I can't reconcile that person with the tyrant who enslaved half the galaxy." Below them, Pan had moved on from aerial acrobatics to practicing her ki control. Small balls of golden energy danced between her fingers like living toys, each one perfectly contained and controlled. But unlike her grandfather's power, there was no hunger in Pan's energy. No need to dominate or convert or reshape. It simply was, existing in harmony with everything around it. "She asked me about him again yesterday," Videl said quietly. "Wanted to know why people call him a hero in some stories and a monster in others." "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that people aren't just one thing, that even good people can make terrible choices when they're scared or hurt or desperate to protect the people they love." Gohan nodded, though part of him wished it were that simple. The galaxy was still dealing with the aftermath of Goku's protection. Entire species had been relocated to safer worlds and now couldn't return home. Governments that had been restructured around perfect efficiency were collapsing under the weight of their own contradictions. The Galactic Patrol was still hunting down rogue governors who had refused to accept the Restoration. "Mr. Gohan," the voice came from behind them, young and hesitant. Gohan turned to find a teenage girl standing in their doorway, May, one of the survivors from the processing centers. She'd been 18 when Goku's system had stripped away her ability to make independent choices. Now, 5 years later, she was finally learning to think for herself again. "What is it, May?" Gohan asked gently. The girl was one of several dozen survivors who had asked to stay near him after the Restoration, finding comfort in the presence of someone who had fought to free them. "There's something wrong with the memorial site," she said, wringing her hands nervously. The statue is doing something strange." Gohan and Videl exchanged glances. The memorial they'd built for Goku stood in the center of West City, depicting him not as the tyrant he'd become, but as the protector he'd once been. It had been Gohan's idea, despite considerable public opposition. They flew to the memorial site, Pan trailing behind them with the easy confidence of a child who had never known a world where flying required permission from the authorities. What they found made Gohan's blood run cold. The The statue was glowing, not with any external light source, but from within, as if the bronze itself had become incandescent. And around its base, hundreds of people had gathered, not to protest or pay respects, but simply standing there, their faces turned upward with expressions of peaceful bliss. "How long have they been here?" Gohan asked the site's caretaker, an elderly man named Dr. Santos, who had volunteered for the job despite having no formal qualifications. "Started about an hour ago," Santos replied, his voice tight with worry. "First just a few people, then more and more. They're not responding to questions, not moving, just standing there." Gohan's enhanced senses picked up something that made his stomach lurch. The people gathered around the statue all had the same energy signature. Not identical, but harmonized in a way that was sickeningly familiar. "Everyone back," he ordered, his voice carrying the authority he'd developed over 5 years of being Earth's primary protector. "This is an evacuation zone, now." As the crowd reluctantly dispersed, Gohan approached the statue cautiously. Up close, the glow was even more unsettling. It pulsed in rhythm with something that felt almost like a heartbeat. "Daddy," Pan tugged on his sleeve, her young face creased with worry. "The statue feels hungry." Before Gohan could respond, the bronze lips of the statue moved. "Hello, son." The voice was exactly as he remembered it, warm, familiar, beloved. But underneath the surface warmth was something else, something that made the air around the statue feel thick and oppressive. "You're not him," Gohan said firmly, his aura beginning to manifest. "You're something else wearing his face." "Am I?" The statue's eyes, bronze moments before, now glowed with that terrible purple-black energy that had once defined evil Goku's final transformation. "Or am I what he always was beneath the surface? The need to protect, to control, to make sure no one ever suffers again." Around the Memorial Plaza, the people who hadn't evacuated far enough began to turn back, their expressions vacant and blissful. More were coming, hundreds of them, drawn by some invisible signal that promised peace and purpose and freedom from the burden of choice. "It's happening again," Videl whispered, recognizing the signs from the old days. "Something's trying to restart his vision." Not something, Gohan realized with growing horror. Someone, or rather, someone's. Through his enhanced senses, he could detect them now, fragments of consciousness from across the galaxy, all the people who had secretly missed the certainty of Goku's control. The ones who had found freedom too frightening, choice too overwhelming, responsibility too heavy to bear. They had found a way to bring back what they'd lost. "We tried democracy," the statue continued, its voice now carrying the harmonized thoughts of thousands of willing slaves. "We tried freedom, look what it gave us: war, crime, suffering, chaos. The same problems your father tried to solve, returning like a cancer." "Because that's what life is," Gohan shot back, his power rising to combat the psychic influence radiating from the statue. "Problems and solutions, joy and pain, growth and loss. You can't eliminate one without destroying the other." "Can't we?" The statue began to move, bronze flesh becoming liquid and then solid again as it stepped down from its pedestal. As it moved, more people joined the gathering crowd, not just humans, but aliens from across the galaxy, all broadcasting the same harmonized signal of willing submission. "Your father's mistake wasn't his goal," the composite entity said, spreading its arms to encompass the growing crowd. "His mistake was trying to impose order from above, but what if it came from below? What if people chose to surrender their freedom willingly?" Pan stepped forward, her young face set with determination that reminded Gohan painfully of his father's stubbornness. "That's not choosing," she said with the clarity that only children possessed. "That's just being scared." The entity wearing Goku's face looked down at her with something approaching fondness. "And what's wrong with being scared, little one? Fear keeps us alive. Fear motivates us to seek safety." "Grandpa was scared too," Pan replied, "but he learned that being scared doesn't mean you get to make decisions for other people. It means you have to be brave enough to trust them to make their own decisions." For just a moment, the entity's confident expression wavered. In that brief instant of uncertainty, Gohan struck, not with physical force, but with the same restoration power he'd used to free the processing center victims. The result was immediate and devastating. The composite entity screamed, not with one voice, but with thousands, all the willing slaves whose fear and desperation had given it form, suddenly remembering what they'd tried to give up. The statue cracked, bronze skin falling away to reveal something that looked almost human, but wasn't quite right. "You don't understand," it pleaded, its voice now desperate instead of confident. "Without guidance, without structure, they'll just hurt themselves again. They'll make the same mistakes, fight the same wars, suffer the same losses. Probably, Gohan agreed, his restoration energy continuing to pour into the entity. But those will be their mistakes to make, their wars to fight, their suffering to endure and learn from. And their joy to experience, Pan added, her own small key beginning to resonate with her father's power. Their love to choose. Their freedom to use however they want. The entity looked around at the crowd, many of whom were now shaking their heads in confusion as the psychic influence released its hold. Some looked relieved to have their independence back. Others looked terrified at the prospect of making their own decisions again. All of them looked human. "This is what you're protecting?" the entity asked, its form beginning to dissolve as the restoration energy completed its work. "This chaos. This imperfection, this life," Gohan corrected, "in all its messy, complicated, beautiful reality." As the last traces of the composite entity faded away, the memorial plaza fell silent except for the confused murmur of people trying to understand what had just happened. The bronze statue had returned to its original form, just metal and memory, with no power to influence or control. But Gohan knew this wouldn't be the last time something like this happened. As long as people existed, there would be those who found freedom too frightening, choice too overwhelming. There would always be someone ready to offer them the comfortable chains of willing submission. "Will it keep happening?" May asked, her voice small and scared. "Will people keep trying to bring back the old ways?" "Probably," Gohan admitted. "But that's okay. Every time they do, we'll be here to remind them why freedom is worth the risk." He looked around at the faces gathered in the plaza, human and alien, young and old, all of them imperfect and struggling and absolutely, undeniably free. "That's what he really gave us in the end," Gohan said quietly, addressing the statue that bore his father's face. "Not the tyranny of his control, but the wisdom to resist it. The strength to choose chaos over comfort, uncertainty over oppression." As they flew home, Pan asked the question that had been haunting Gohan for 5 years. "Do you think Grandpa is proud of us?" Gohan looked down at his daughter, strong, independent, free to make her own choices and her own mistakes, and felt something that might have been his father's presence, warm and approving and utterly without the need to control or direct. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I think he is." That night, as Earth settled into the comfortable chaos of billions of free minds making billions of individual choices, Gohan stood watch over a world that bore the scars of perfect order and had chosen beautiful imperfection instead. Somewhere in the space between what was and what could be, he could feel his father's presence. Not as the tyrant who had tried to cage the universe, but as the man who had ultimately chosen to let it be free. The price of peace, they had learned, was not control. It was the courage to let people be human. And in a universe where love existed without chains, where protection didn't require submission, where loss was accepted as the price of genuine life, that was enough. The memorial would stand not as a monument to power, but as a reminder of the choice to let go. And in letting go, they had finally found what Goku had spent his life searching for. A peace worth protecting because it could never be possessed. The end. So there it is. The man who taught us that anyone could change had to learn that lesson himself the hardest way possible. Goku's story here isn't really about good versus evil. It's about love without wisdom, strength without restraint, and the terrifying realization that our greatest virtues can become our worst flaws. Watching Gohan step up, not just as a fighter but as the moral center his father lost, honestly hit me right in the feels. What moment broke your heart the most? For me, it was Pan telling her grandfather he'd lost everyone because he stopped being who they loved. Sometimes kids see the truth adults can't handle. Drop your thoughts below, smash subscribe for more stories that'll mess with your emotions, and remember, even in our darkest moments, there's always a choice to be better. Catch you next time.